Land Trust of Napa County provides land use and research opportunities for thousands of students, from preschoolers to doctoral candidates, opportunities which foster appreciation and understanding of the natural environment and the conservation of natural resources. And whereas the Land Trust of Napa County has worked collaboratively with private landowners and resource agencies, resulting in the permanent protection of nearly 53,000 acres of land with significant conservation values, and whereas the Land Trust of Napa County has more than 1,300 active members and more than 200 active volunteers participating on more than 16 committees, and all of whom work to ensure that important Napa County land is conserved for both present and future generations. And whereas the Land Trust of Napa County has worked with private landowners to ensure a portion of Hopper Creek flowing into the town of Yountville and the Mount St. John viewshed to the west of Yountville will be protected for all time. And whereas all those who have a special fondness for Napa County and want to ensure that its incomparable beauty, rural character, biodiversity, and agricultural vitality are protected in perpetuity, owe a deep appreciation for the efforts by the Land Trust of Napa County. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Cynthia Saucerman, Mayor, on behalf of the Yountville Town Council, do hereby proclaim the month of June as the Land Trust of Napa County Month and express our appreciation of the organization's efforts on behalf of all Napa County residents.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, Town Council. My name is Chip Borrell. I'm a longtime Land Trust member and volunteer and currently serving on the board. So I appreciate this recognition. The Land Trust is celebrating Land Trust Month in June with the first ever membership drive, hoping to add 500 new members, get them on board to support the important Land Trust work. And we're having a kickoff party on Saturday, May 22nd, 2 to 4 p.m. at the River Terrace Inn on Soskull in Napa. And everyone in the community is invited, and we hope to see everyone there. So thank you again.
Thank you. Item B, Joint Wastewater Treatment Plant, WWTP Status Report.
Madam Mayor, Town Council, we have a presentation. Monthly, we've been bringing you reports with pictures and schedules and budgets since this project began. Tonight, we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation with some pictures. In your staff report, some project history, the schedule, which will be summarized, the presentation, financial impact, and then the attachments as well. So Don Moore is here to speak about the project. If you have any questions at the end of the presentation, please let us know. Don?
Thank you, Graham. Thank you for allowing me to come and speak on this. We've been talking about it for a long time, and we're really excited about what we've done so far and where we're going to be when we're all finished. So a little bit of history. Some of you may or may not know that the wastewater treatment plant was originally built in 1939 and treated the wastewater exclusively for the Veterans Home. The town had its own separate wastewater treatment plant in the southeast corner of town, south end of Washington, behind the Catholic Church. There have been many upgrade projects since the original build date, but in 1977, the largest one took place, where the town and Veterans Home treatment plants were both in need of some major renovations, and it was determined that it made the most most sense to combine the two plants into one. The wastewater treatment plant, the town's treatment plant behind the Catholic Church, would be converted to a pump station, as all of the wastewater generated by the residents flowed by gravity to this point, and it just made sense to turn that into a pumping station that would convey the flow to the new treatment plant at the Veterans Home property. Recently, the town just conducted a mixing zone study. What this did was allowed us to calculate the distance downstream that it took for the town's effluent to be completely mixed with the Napa River. It was found that within 400 feet, which is relatively a short distance, that our effluent was completely mixed, which really put the argument to rest about the installation of the diffuser. So we are achieving the regional board's goal of being completely mixed within an acceptable distance. So we don't have to revisit that diffuser thing anymore. Here are some photos of us doing the mixing zone study. Town staff worked with Larry Walker Associates to, what we did was we strung rope across to get samples at equal spots across the width of the river. And then down here you can see an inert tracer dye was introduced to measure the plume length and width as our effluent flowed and mixed with the river. Negotiations have been going on since October 2009 between the town and the Regional Water Quality Control Board regarding the reissuance of the town's 5-year NPDES permit. After approval of the results of the mixing zone study and a couple of other issues that we kind of went back and forth on, the town recently attended, Graham and I went to Oakland and attended the meeting, and we got our new permit adopted, of which we can fully comply with, and we should have no issue. The scope of the Title 22 upgrade project would require modification of the existing filtration technology to the DHS requirements. That's where the whole Title 22 thing comes from, that title that comes from the Department of Health Services requirements. As part of the project also, we would construct a new chlorine contact chamber that would allow us to achieve the required 90-minute chlorine contact time to be fully disinfected. Also, upgrade of the coagulant feed system and controls for more efficient filtration. I'll get into that a little further as we go into the presentation. Another big part of this project would be to install a structure that we call the wet well that would allow for us to pump recycled water to our customers without having to pump it from our holding pond, where the sunlight encourages algae growth and it just degrades the recycled water. So we're pumping them what we're actually making. Here's a couple of shots of the same area, just from different angles of the area that the majority of the work would take place during this project. This is the fuzzy filter. These are sand filters that have been out of service for about 15 years. We have this other large area here. This is the chemical storage area. This would be all demoed, and this is what's called the head tank. Again, I'll get into a little bit more of what the head tank is or was later on. So the first phase would be demolition, and that would be to demo and remove the head tank, chemical storage, and the old sand filters. These filters were full of sand media, different grades of media, filled up to about the height of this guy's shoulder. And so it wasn't a matter, and the bottom third is full of concrete. So this wasn't something that we could just latch onto and throw on a truck and get out of there. It was, as you could see, there was quite a deal to cut into these things and get them removed. But here's a picture after they were gone. The removal of the head tank and the chemical storage area would allow us to work from both the golf course property over in this area and be able to, it would allow the contractors to work from the town site as well. The original plan was to keep the chemical storage area, and that would make it, that would let the contractor only work from the golf course side. So this is an overhead shot of that chemical tank system that would be removed. This is the new tank that would take the place of this huge footprint. This is a tank within a tank, so it's double-walled, so it has adequate protection from damage to the inner tank or outer tank. It's doubly contained. This is the future site being prepped for the new chemical storage, and here it is how it will be for the rest of its life. Some of the benefits to moving the chemical storage pad. The material that the old tanks were made of were outdated, and they were out of compliance with seismic regulations. As I said, this also reduced the overall footprint of the chemical storage, which would allow us to, for future installation of additional filtration technology, another fuzzy filter or 2 fuzzy filters or something else. It freed up a lot of space. The demo of the head tank was quite a project. That tank was about 13 feet in diameter and about 16 feet tall. Again, not something you just latch onto and put on a truck. But that's what we did. We found a crane big enough and did just that. We kept the head tank. So there's been some ideas of the use of the head tank, and one of them being to store recycled water in the tank, and then a series of pumps would pump them to parks that are within close proximity. A couple of those parks might be Veterans Memorial Park, Vineyard Park, and we've also talked about the possibility of irrigating Yountville Park if we could figure out a way to get a distribution line installed next to the bike path. Early on, we experienced some pretty heavy rains in October. Approximately 30 days were lost to these rain events. Additional man hours were spent removing the caved-in walls and the debris and pumping out the water. This is the site where the chlorine contact chamber would be built. This hole is about 12 feet deep, so there's about 7 feet of water in this hole that just came because all of the water sheets off the whole courtyard and just went right in there. So we had to come up with a plan to keep that from happening. The biggest problem wasn't the rain; it was just the runoff from the courtyard. So we developed a way to protect the site, install the sump pump, and we could pump it off to where it wouldn't cause us any more problem. Which kind of dovetails into a little extra bonus that we got as part of this work. Due to a fairly substantial credit back, we were able to install a storm drain system that had been lacking in the past. So we installed 5 drain inlet boxes, and then it ties into this area back here that was an existing storm drain that goes out to Hinman Creek. So a much needed project. This is the first half of the new chlorine contact chamber being formed up. There is it was poured in 2 halves. There's a seam that goes along this wall across the bottom and up the other side. So it's really a 2-piece structure to allow for expansion and ground shifting and movement. This is the infamous fuzzy filter control panel that took us a long time to get, but we do have it on site now, and this was one of the major parts of the upgrade in regards to the current filtration technology. We needed to make multiple revisions to what was previously built, one being that we had to backwash the filter, we had to use filtered treated water, so installation and modifications to the PLC were necessary. the town got a substantial credit back of about $70,000 by purchasing this new tank rather than adding to the old PLC, or the kind of the brain of the filtration technology. The chemical feed pumps were completely replaced, and also these are the pumps here. These are called VFDs, and they allow the pumps to ramp up in speed as the flow increases. That's variable frequency drive is what VFD stands for. So that receives a signal based on the flow meter. So as the flow picks up, these pumps will pick up accordingly to add the proper amount of coagulant so that we stay under the turbidity unit of 2. That's all part of the Title 22 rules. And so a flow switch will be installed to trigger an alarm in the event that there's a pump failure. So that'll call one of us at home probably at 2 a.m. to let us know that there's a problem with the pump. This is a shot of our recycled water pump station. There are 2 pumps in this area here that pump currently out of the pond. So everything that was treated at the plant would have to go to this pond first. One pump is designated to the golf course. The other sends water through about a 4.5-mile distribution system out to Silverado Trail to our winery customers. This structure here allows flow to the river. There's a valve that we open up when we can meet the sufficient dilution and the correct time of year, and all of our flow goes to the river by gravity through this structure here. We don't pump anything to the river; it's all gravity. In that same area, this is the wet well that will. This is the finished product, but this new structure will allow the recycled water pumps to deliver water without having to pump from the pond, so that the water that we deliver is a better product. What this also allows for is the simultaneous pumping to the recycled water users and discharge to the Napa River during high flow periods and or pump failure or pump capacity exceedances. The idea is that if the pumps have a capacity of 1 million gallons and we find ourselves in a storm period and we're sending 2 million to the pumps, the flow will back up in this line and will go to another box similar to it, and it will automatically overflow to the holding pond without any operator interface. It'll just happen overnight or whenever. No one has to do anything. This will all be automatic. We'll fill the pond and it'll go to the river. Another series of pumps that are on the levees, these are called the excess pond pumps. When you drive into the courtyard and the pond that's on your left, that's the final product. That's our holding pond that we deliver to the users or we discharge to the river. On the other side of it is a pond of similar size, and that's where the backwash waste from the backwashing of the filter goes. The flows in excess of 2 million gallons also go there. We bring that water back for retreatment. We're modifying the suction so we can also pump down the holding pond so we can maintain the holding pond, completely dry it out, and remove the sludge that has been sludge is not such a pretty word, but remove the sludge that has been accumulating for about the last 30 or 40 years. We had no way to do this before because we're always treating water. It has to go somewhere, so this bypass is really a good thing. So this is the same picture of the before, and this is where we currently are now. This is the fuzzy filter here. So this is the new chlorine contact chamber, completely finished, minus the guardrails and decking. Our new storm drain system to catch that water coming from the rest of the courtyard. Some things to look ahead at, some things that might be coming your way are Phase 2 and Phase 3 of the upgrades. Phase 2 will be to expand the recycled water distribution system, and that will include the electrical conduit and wire, pumps, motors, piping, and storage capacity. We'll increase the storage capacity by recruiting new customers. And this is in our permit that we need to complete this by December 1st, 2013. Phase 3 will include the introduction of SCADA technology. That stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. And what that means is kind of an automated overview of the different user sites of our own treatment facility, so that the idea would be that the on-call operator might take home a laptop. If he gets an alarm, he'll be able to pull it up on the laptop and say, oh, it's pump 1 has failed, pump 2 failed to start. If he can start it by the laptop, and then he'll go in and see and diagnose the problem, so we have no issues. The SCADA is, they want to see this by December 1st, 2015. And what that SCADA will be controlling will be various pumps and valves with the recycled water, user sites, and basically encompass all of the plant operations, storage pond volumes, operational alarms, and continuous monitoring results. And with that, that kind of concludes my presentation of what we've been doing with that Title 22 project.
Don, you mentioned at one point having to discharge water to the river, and I was of the impression that the Title 22 upgrade was to attain zero discharge. Is that correct?
We probably shouldn't have called it a zero discharge at the beginning, but that was the idea, and that's where we'd like to get to, and that's what that expansion of the recycled water system will be, is to be recruiting new users. Currently, our pumps, during the winter, when we're getting flows of 2 million gallons, our current pumps can't pump it to the users fast enough, nor do we have adequate storage at this time to take that just unlimited. We need to bring on more users and more storage ponds so we can do that. We're trying to get there. This is kind of the first step to get there. We're not at a zero discharge yet. We brought on Mondavi Group, and there's a lot of storage available on that property.
That's our goal, to attain zero discharge.
I don't think we ever want to give up a discharge permit, and I think we might want to call it something more like full reclamation or something, because zero is zero. That's pretty straightforward. Some is not zero. So, but in cases of high storm periods, we would want to keep that discharge permit, because if we don't discharge to the river and we don't have a permit, if we absolutely need to for some reason, we'll be in complete violation if we don't have a permit. So we want to just keep that permit. I wouldn't recommend ever giving up a discharge permit.
Does council have any questions? Thank you.
Two final things was you do have a budget in here. We're about 79% complete with the budget, and the schedule is we should be finishing up mid-June.
Great. Thank you. Anyone care to comment on this item? It's interesting, exciting, fuzzy filters, all that stuff. All right.
Thanks for the big turnout. I didn't think everyone. I didn't think that was such an interest in it.
Yeah. Glad you wore a tie, Don. Wait for that sludge removal party, right?
Yeah, sludge. Boy, it just brings them in.
We have another presentation scheduled, but for whatever reason, the Chamber Board of Directors President is not here. He's running a teensy bit behind on schedule, so we can move forward with the next item, and we'll come back to that presentation once he arrives. Item 9, dog park process update. Do we have a staff report? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. For the past 3 months, the Parks and Community Services Commission has engaged the community in a discussion about whether or not we need a dog park in Yountville, and if so, where would be the best place to locate it. Now, this discussion has generated lots of passion, to say the least, on both sides of the issue. There's been a lot of public testimony and many emails and letters sent, which we're keeping in a binder. Now, the folks who are in favor of a dog park point to the following benefits: the ability to exercise their dogs off leash, the ability for them to socialize with other dog owners, which leads to building a greater sense of community. They point to the fact that currently there's no place in town to legally let your dog off leash. And some have suggested that possibly we should try a pilot dog park to see how it works. Now, the opponents of the dog park point to the fact that they feel Yountville's too small for a dog park. There's a dog park close by in Napa that Yountville residents can use. Most of the sites being considered, in their opinion, are incompatible with nearby residences and the current use patterns for our parks. They point to the expense of building and maintaining a dog park and the proliferation of traffic and congestion that they believe will result from building a dog park. The following potential sites for a dog park were considered, all of which are owned by the town: Yountville Community Park, Forester Park, the open space parcel adjacent to Oak Circle and Hopper Creek, Vineyard Park, Veterans Memorial Park, and the undeveloped parcel just south of Veterans Memorial Park. Now, the Parks and Community Services Commission process over the last 3 months has included a tour of the potential sites that the Commission took with the public, and 3 meetings at which the public could comment on this issue. And a compilation of the comments that we've received from the public are in your packet. The Commission then adopted decision-making criteria in regard to the dog park, and those criteria are also in your packet. After adopting those criteria, the Commission applied the criteria to the potential sites being considered, and based on their criteria, they eliminated from consideration all of the sites except Veterans Memorial Park and that parcel just south. So tonight, we're seeking Town Council policy direction. You could either have your commission keep moving forward with their process and make a final recommendation to the council, or you could stop the process now and don't build a dog park at this time. If you'd like the commission to proceed, the next logical steps would be to visit dog parks in surrounding areas, talk to people who have designed and operated them, to learn the pros and cons and what's worked and what hasn't worked, to develop preliminary design concepts and cost estimates for the 2 remaining sites being considered, and to develop preliminary rules and regulations for the operation of the dog park. I'd like to point out that no funding has been proposed in fiscal year 2010-11 budget for a dog park. So if the council ultimately decides to build a dog park, no money would be available until at least fiscal year 2011-12, unless the council authorized a special allocation outside of the current budget process. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Excuse me, does council have any questions for staff at this time? Vice Mayor?
If I may, John, just to touch on one topic that I know was discussed quite a bit. It wasn't specifically mentioned in your presentation, though, but much of the negative feedback related to having a park near any residences. And I think there was some consensus, even for people that were supporting the park, that there was an understanding that we really didn't think of any viable sites could be in close proximity to residences. But was there ever really a definition of what is too close?
Not specifically. The criteria that the commission adopted indicated that the site would have to be acceptable to nearby residents as well as dog owners. No specific distance was ever identified, but you're very accurate in indicating that that was a key consideration throughout the entire process.
Okay, thank you.
Before I open up the public comment, I just want to make a notation that we did receive this evening on the dais 2 letters, one from DSL Hotels and Spas representing the Yountville Inn opposed to the dog park, as well as one from an email from Mr. Alman Bundy, also opposed to the dog park. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this matter this evening? Yes, sir.
Good evening, esteemed council members. I'm Lisa Holt, and I am a resident of very close to the Yountville town border, 1518 Yountville Crossroad. I'm here to voice my objection to the idea of placing a dog park in either the Veterans Home location, Veterans Memorial Park location, or the parcel immediately south of that location. In reading through the criteria, one of the indications that they felt blocked out the rest of the options on the park locations was locations close enough to residences. One thing that I think people aren't considering in the Veterans Park and the southern location is the fact that coming online later this year will be 25 residences immediately across the street. They're the low-income residents that will become part of the Yountville Inn. They're being built by the Yountville Inn project at the moment. The second thing I'd like to say about that is that I think that criteria is a little skewed from the standpoint that no one wants it near a residence, and no one wants it near a residence because of the noise that the parks generate and kind of the visual disturbance that they create, because they're usually not very attractive. If you just take a visit to Alston Park, that solves that problem. What you're missing in there is the fact that Yountville Inn, which is a hotel which will be hosting over 50,000 guests a year, opening in September, and those are guests to our community, will be severely impacted by a location of a dog park immediately across the street from it. It will impact it in terms of the traffic congestion that will be caused. It'll impact it in terms of the noise, the visual implication. And I have to just question the idea that we would consider doing something that I consider to be visually deleterious to a corner that is truly a gateway to our community and is presently immaculately maintained and quite a beautiful park, and is and hosts multiple usages. And the park, if Veterans Park or the parcel below it were converted to a dog park, it severely limits the amount of residents and visitors that would actually enjoy recreating in the area. And I think that's a mistake on the part of town, because we sort of represent, I consider to be the heart of the valley, and I think it would be it would have a negative impact on all the visitors that come to Yountville, as well as other residents that have to pass by a chain-linked area that isn't very attractive. Not to mention the increased traffic congestion. I feel strongly that if someone lives where, for instance, I lived on Yountville Crossroad, for me to get my dog to a dog park that was located on South Washington Street, I would put the dog in the car and we would drive over there. So not only are you including more traffic congestion as a result of that area, but you also have to consider the impact of the residents on the traffic, the traffic on the residents of Gateway Mobile Home Park, the new upcoming residents that will be living in the low-income housing, as well as the guests of Yountville Inn, who, when we're done, will have a minimum of 80 cars, which you've already pre-approved and are all set to go. So I think that there's a number of elements that negatively impact the selection of a location in either of those two spots on south of Washington Street. I also feel strongly that if the dog owners have such easy access, which they do, to Alston Park, which is a very well-located dog run park. It's enormous. It's not near any residences, and it's allowed to be run down looking because that's sort of the nature of a dog park, and it doesn't impact anyone over there. So I feel very strongly that this is a mistake for us to consider in our town. Gosh, I think that's about everything I felt I needed to say tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Debbie Alterstar, 1884 Larkspur Street. A few years ago, before we built the community center, people said, well, that big room is just a basketball court. Well, that big room is a basketball court. Well, that big room is a basketball court. It'll never be used. This is excessive. We shouldn't do this. This is a waste of money. This is going to ruin our town. And I think that these are some of the comments that you hear about so the same pattern with the issue of dogs, is that maybe some of it's true, and maybe some of it's fears, and maybe some of it's misstatements of a function of a location. We're not talking about Alston Park here. Just like the multi-use room in the community center, most of the time it's probably used for things other than basketball. So I want to be careful to separate fears and realities, and to realize there's some things that we don't know, and that's part of why the topic of a pilot comes up. There are a lot of communities that have really tiny off-leash areas that are grass, and one of these is Sonoma. The town of Sonoma has an area like this, and I think it's right next to their police station. I'm trying to remember what's there. I'll have to go back and look, and it's tiny. The point is just that people want a legal place to be in the park. Currently, people allow their dogs to be off-leash illegally because we live in a really tiny town. Some people don't have yards. Some people have very small yards, and so people are making illegal choices for lack of a legal one. They're not asking for Alston Park here, again, to be clear, just like the community center is not just a basketball room. We don't know what the costs are. What would happen if we put in temporary fencing and we saw how much wear was there really on a grass area of local dogs? The other thing I'd like to say about hotels is that we have the Bardesano Inn here right now, and it's a very, very expensive hotel, and it overlooks vacant lots and parking lots and affordable housing. And somehow they're doing just fine. So I think we have to remember that this town is for the people who live here too. I don't expect people to drive to a postage stamp off-leash area. Why would they when they can go to Alston? This is for neighbors to come together, just like people come together here to play Scrabble, or they come together here to have recreation classes with their neighbors. It's different. If you're driving to Napa, you're not doing it with you're not having your activities with your Yountville neighbors. It's not building community. I really don't see people driving to use this location. So again, we don't know what would actually happen, but I just want to clarify that people talk about what they fear.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Bundy?
Mayor? First, I'd like to thank John DiLorenzo and the members of the Park Community Service Commission for all their hard work and the excellent report that you prepared tonight. I think you've hit a lot of the areas that are of concern to me, so I'm going to go over all the issues I have with the dog park tonight. You have it in front of you. I'd also like to reinforce what the person, a couple before me, said about Veterans Park. It's a wonderful park. And I've taken the liberty to go take pictures for the last 2 or 3 weeks of all the activities that are taking place in that park, in the volleyball court, people just laying in the grass with a blanket and a picnic, people having family outings in the park, obviously the bocce ball court. It's a very well-used park. I don't want anybody to think that this is just an area that is, if you don't know, it's used all the time, and it's beautiful, and it is the gateway, the first thing people see when they drive in to our town. Yountville is a wonderful place to live. We're all lucky to live here. And there's many places, events, and activities that are scheduled all the time for socialization and community building. I don't doubt that having a dog park would allow people to have another opportunity, but we don't really have a dearth of community building activities and community building opportunities here in town. I would hope that our actions as residents and the council would be to first do no harm to our town, and anything we consider to make sure we're not going backwards. Let's face it, we really can't afford a dog park right now. We're too small to have a dog park right now. It's not going to solve any of the problems. The idea that it will alleviate current problems of people who are ignoring ordinances, people who are letting their dog off leash, letting them urinate or defecate in public areas and not cleaning up, will do that on the way to the dog park. Those same people will do that. So I think that's not really a good reason to consider a dog park, is to prevent people from having to break the current ordinances. I guess I'm just going to sum it up. I'm urge you tonight to go ahead and make the decision and take the second recommendation, number 2, that's offered to you, and that is to adopt an option to not go forward and not build a dog park in Yountville. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. My name is David Shapiro with DLS Hotels and Spas. We are the operating partners in the Yountville Inn. We are also the designers of the Yountville Inn, and we've been working on the project for 2 years. So we have an intimate relationship with that part of town, and we are quite concerned as to the idea that we would position a dog park at Veterans Park. Now, I'm a dog lover. We have cats. I'd like to have a cat park, but I will tell you this. It would be great. My cats would love that. But I will say this. A dog park located at that intersection, like Lisa had said before me, and the gentleman just said, is literally the gateway to the entire Yountville. It is the first impression, the last impression that guests will have. And all anyone needs to do is look at Alston Park to see what dog parks are like. Now, I think dog parks are kind of like airports. I think they're very similar. Everybody kind of wants them if they use them, but nobody wants them in their backyard. And so in the criteria, we've negated all the residents. So Veterans Park and the unincorporated, not that little, but south of Veterans Park now are the only areas being considered because they don't have any direct residents across the street. But what you do have is a luxury hotel with its entire view shed open to the Veterans Park, and all of the design and all of the millions of dollars invested have been into take advantage of that. And in our wildest dreams, we wouldn't think that it'd be turned into a dog park. And in terms of usage, we have 2,900 residents, something like that. The census just coming out. But out of that, 1,100 are vets. And so that makes 1,800 residents. And I think the national average is 39% of people have dogs. And so if you were to say 39% of 1,800, that's 700. So if everybody used a dog park, that would be 700 people using the dog park, and that would be insane, obviously. But if you cut that in half, you have 350. And if you cut that in half, you have 175. And if you cut that in half, you got 87. If you cut that in half, you have 43. I mean, you can go down to the point to where you have a minuscule amount. Still means you've got 40, 50, 60 cars, and people visiting that park every single day. And I think that at that intersection where you have a hotel checking in 80 guests potentially a day, where you have restaurants and people visiting the town, and residents to Gateway and the new Napa workforce housing will all be negatively affected. So to just give you some highlights on my letter for the sake of the audience here, I'll just give you a few highlights. I said it will cause extreme financial hardship to the fundamental success of the Yountville Inn, which is scheduled to reopen this summer after years of construction, significant financial investment into the site. The entire layout of the renovated hotel, its internal programming, operations, and design were all developed with the Veterans Park as the natural setting that borders the property's complete western frontage. Furthermore, our most significant public space, our outdoor dining, our pools, our conference center, our spa are all positioned within the direct view shed of this proposed dog park. Additionally, the largest and most valuable guest rooms and suites are suites face the park. 2 grand suites, 4 junior suites, and a presidential suite, and all have outdoor terraces that will be significantly devalued due to the resulting traffic congestion, noise, barking, parking, and potential odor that the proposed sites would entail. The Yountville Inn stands to lose millions of dollars in future revenue from negative press of having a dog park positioned so closely to guest dining, pools, biking paths, running paths, wedding sites, event areas, and spa activities. The impact of the additional noise, dog abuse landscaping, chain link fencing, crowded parking constraints, and additional traffic so close to our guests and activities will affect our ability to charge even a competitive rate for rooms. That lost revenue will significantly reduce the hotel's profitability and thus its respective contribution to the town of Yountville. It was stated in the staff report that the presence of a dog park close to hotels has a positive effect. In our case, it doesn't. We don't accept dogs. Yountville Villaggio doesn't accept dogs. And so the 2 closest hotels that would access that dog park don't allow dogs. And we don't allow dogs for obvious reasons. They're tough on carpet, they're difficult on furniture, they're noisy, dogs bark, and it's not an experience that we would expect if we were paying $400 a night to stay in a luxury hotel in Yountville. We have been here before, and we have been talking about stone walls to shield our guests from the street view. We have been very cooperative and just redesigned our entire frontage, which fronts Veterans Park, with a beautiful curved wall and a lot of open fencing and landscaping so that the city has this open view shed. If a dog park was proposed and put in that place, we would respectfully ask the council to reconsider that design and potentially ask if we could reinstate the wall idea, because it would be a huge detriment to our success as a hotel property. The woman who spoke before me was saying that Bardesano is doing just fine. Well, they're not doing just fine, and for a number of reasons. But the thing that is most important to note is Bardesano, because they were fronting the playground and houses, they designed the entire property to face inward, and so all the public spaces is actually in a courtyard environment. We actually did the opposite. We actually designed our property to look out, to take in the vistas, because we had those beautiful redwood trees and all that beautiful Veterans Park across the street. So that doesn't work for our thinking. The increased traffic from expanding Yountville in entry during and exits during our crucial check-in times is 4 to 6 p.m. That also directly coincides with when dark park usage is at its highest, which is 5 p.m. So right at 5 p.m., when we have the most people checking in and checking out, that intersection there will be having people trying to park for the dog park, and you're going to have additional residents at the workforce housing, and that could become a huge bottleneck for town. Also, 5 p.m., 6 p.m. is when people go to dinner and would be visiting as well. And we, like Lisa said, we anticipate well over 50,000 guests will be experiencing our property uniquely to our property, and will be experiencing a dog park if it was located at Veterans Park. And that would have a direct, immediate, and lasting impression on town. And so I think it would be very expensive and very time-consuming to try to keep Veterans Park looking as pristine as it does into the future. Or it will just get run down like dog parks do, and we will have an eyesore for the town and a very difficult situation for the Yountville property. So again, thank you for listening to my comments, and that's all for me.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Megan Lopez. I am coming to you today. I work here in Yountville, and on the recreational point of view, I actually play volleyball at that park. And so to not have it there, to have my friends and I be able to go and play volleyball would be very upsetting to us. So on the recreational standpoint, we find it as a community activity where we come together to play and congregate. So I do not recommend a dog park there by any means. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
Donna Hine, Gateway Mobile Home Park. I am not as eloquent as the people who have preceded me. Actually, I have to say that I can't think of anything that fills a room more than whether you're talking sex education in a school or eliminating football, but here we're talking about a dog park. I am an animal lover. I've always had dogs and cats, and boa constrictors, and lizards, and snails, and a variety of animals as my children grew up, and had adopted a few of them after they grew up. I never found it necessary to take my animals to a separate place to walk, to visit with other animals. It's very nice to socialize with other animals and with other people, but you don't have to leave the neighborhood for it. I'm also concerned about the I don't have to say any more about the Veterans Park, but I am concerned about the other concept of the area next to and across from the church and across from the workforce housing. That area should be considered for parking. We need more parking. It has been talked about, bandied about for quite some time, and I think that that is a far better use for that particular space than an animal park. I also have to just say one more thing. I concur exactly with everything that has been said by people, the young people who play volleyball. That park is always full of people, and it just isn't a practical place. And as an animal lover, I appreciate the work that has gone into this, the committee who has spent time and effort, staff that has spent time and effort, but again, nobody has talked about financing. And I remember Mr. Rogers pointing out to me at our last meeting when I mentioned very casually the amount of dollars that we would need to help the school district. And I think he reminded me that there was no money, and if I had been at the budget meeting, I would have realized that $100,000 was more than we could afford. I'm sure a dog park isn't going to cost that much, but I don't think you can afford it, and I think you should put it to rest. There should be a little sign that says, "We have been here and we have passed on."
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. If you have comments, please be ready to come up and make your
This is
comments.
just very short. I'm Julie Worthington, and I want to thank you for that nice presentation. But the first question that was up there was, do we need a dog park? And it seems to me we've bypassed that, and we're on number 2. Why don't we go back to number 1 and decide if we need it, and then maybe we don't even need to go to number 2.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm John Holt. I'm a resident and a member of the bocce team and our own local bocce team, and a veteran. And I was a little bit behind the 8 ball because I didn't get to the earlier meetings. Excellent work by the commission there. I am, though, concerned about the space requirements for any kind of off-leash facility that we might want to add. If, as was pointed out by Ms. Hine, we even need a dog park, so of some kind. I did look at the space on the down at the end of Oak Circle. And frankly, that looked much more more viable and much more perhaps spacious than Veterans Park. And the last thing was I just felt that the park that is the gateway to our community certainly ought to be maintained in the best condition that it could. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Good evening, Chris Pomerani, 131 Vineyard Circle. Hi, guys. I love dogs. I love our dog owners. I appreciate their desire for a park, but for all the reasons that have been stated here tonight, Veterans Memorial Park's just simply not the place for it. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Chuck Foster, Young Mill Road. First of all, I'll have to disagree. I think you're very eloquent. You did a great job. But, you know, I think where the Park Commission still has some viable work they can do. I don't think you should discount it tonight. The other thing I have to say, I hadn't intended to speak, but to comfort the people from the inn, if they've only seen a chain-linked Alston Park, they haven't looked around. If you go to Sebastopol, they have a dog park there that you could just easily walk in with your golf clubs or your tennis outfit. It has low PVC-clad wavelength fences, chairs, fountains, grass. It's just gorgeous. It is a park. It would actually rival anything that we have currently. And the notion that a dog park done to the level that Yountville could do a dog park would cost any hotel millions of dollars, I think, is just over the top. And it's I'm just hoping the council won't rely on that sort of whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to think of a word other than hysteria. They can be done very well. They're not going to inflict. You know, the dog parks that I've been to, I have a dog, and I call into places if I'm traveling with them. The dogs don't bark incessantly. In fact, the community of people that come take care of that very quickly. People do pick up after themselves. And the notion that if you start to put together what other venues, I mean, there are some, but what other venues do we have where people can casually come and meet their friends and sit around and chit-chat? It's a great comfort. And whether it's one location or the other doesn't matter to me. I just think you should not discount it out of hand tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? All right, seeing no further public comment, we'll bring it back to council for further discussion and or a decision. Councilmember Mueller?
I really would like to thank John and Steve for really bringing this up so that it could be well vetted by our community, and I think that you have done that more than 100%. So thank you for all your efforts and everybody there. I think if we were going to do a dog park, we would do it in typical Yountville style, and we would have a really good dog park. I think that to make one adequate, I don't want to be restrictive for a pocket park because we have big dogs. So, but when I really have assessed everything, it really comes down to the budget. I think that was John's last line item. We don't have it in the budget to do a good job. Would be costly, and there would be maintenance, and therefore, I'm not in favor of the dog park.
Thank you for your comments. Councilmember Chilton?
I want to echo the comments of Councilmember Mueller regarding the efforts of John DeLorenzo, Steve Rogers, the Parks Commission staff, everybody who keeps showing up to all these meetings and sending me more emails on this topic than all the other very important topics in town. I think there's probably a middle ground on a lot of the comments we've heard. I agree with Councilman Mueller. I don't think a dog park has to be an eyesore. Alston Park, I agree, is not a great model for what you would want to see right in Yountville, but it is out in the middle of kind of nowhere. So the idea of a chain link fence, you see some places that have fake grass, anything like that would not make sense. And it does go to the real concern of if we were going to do something anywhere in town, I think it would be costly. So the idea that it would cost less than $100,000, Donna, I would disagree with that. I think it would cost more. I generally do not believe that it would be a huge detriment to the town. I don't think it's going to cause gigantic amount of traffic. We'd never have a bocce ball court. We would never have a park there if we were worried about people showing up. So this idea of we're not building a baseball park here. We're building a park in a park that already exists. So the idea of traffic congestion, I don't see that as an issue. I think the real question is it goes back to, I'm not exactly sure who said it, but A, does Yountville really need a dog park? And I don't think that's 100% clear to me. I think if we had an easy place to put it, then it would be fine and go for it. But I think our problem is that we've gone over, for years, a variety of different spots, and I have stated repeatedly that I don't think it's fair to consider it in a residential neighborhood, because that was not the sort of the terms that people came in on. That very arguably could and should apply to the folks at the Yountville Inn. I don't understand, and we consistently say that the inn was built towards the park, yet the initial plans had 8-foot fences all the way along the park. So part of that is in conflict to me, but at the same time, the town has asked them to go to great lengths to open that up. So the concerns that the inn, I think, have are reasonable. I don't think it's going to destroy the inn, but ultimately, to do what we talk about doing, A, would cost a lot of money, and B, is I don't understand how such a small, I have to go to Sonoma and see it, I guess, such a small area, even in Veterans Park I would never advocate taking out the volleyball courts. If you're going to put it in that small grassy area, it's just small. And I just don't know that it's appropriate in this town for something that's that small. I question the use of it, and we don't have the money for it. So, obviously people could go out and try to raise money. I think 6 figures is going to be a lot of money. Otherwise, I honestly don't think it's a priority at this point.
Thank you. Councilmember Dutton?
Thank you, Mayor. I, too, would like to thank the efforts of John and the Parks Commission. I know I went to 2 of the meetings and was involved with the initial site visits and what have you. Without rehashing everything that's said, and I agree 100% with both council members' previous comments, I would like to pick up, though, where Councilman Chilton started there with looking across there and do we have the size. And I think, to me, that's where it really boils down to. We're a very small town with very limited open space. And I guess what really jarred me when we first started on the comments from the tours, there was a gentleman that was brought up from Napa that was sort of a dog, quote, expert, park expert. And the second park that we visited was Forester Park. For any of those who know it, it's probably a park that encompasses at least 6 to 8 home site size in there. He looked at it and saw this is much too small. And my comment was, well, if he thinks this is small, he's not going to see anything he likes in. Because, believe me, it just kept getting smaller and smaller. In no way could I ever agree to do anything with Veterans Park. Over the years, we commented today during our budget discussions, these parks have never looked any better. And I would never, as long as I have a vote, would approve anything to be done at Veterans Park. Which leaves us with the site south. Again, as they said right off the bat, we're not going to put it in neighborhoods. Well, right across the street, you're going to have 25 affordable housing units. And to me, that's a neighborhood and everything that goes along with it. So aside from the money and everything, personally, the town is too small. We can't be everything to everybody, and I'm afraid this is one of the things that I couldn't approve at all. And so no, I think the matter should, in my mind, be put to rest, and we should just get on with other things. We just don't have the size down for a dog park.
Thank you for your comments. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. In addition to commending town staff, I'd like to commend Debbie Alter-Starr. She's been at this since the very beginning for years. And, for some of us on the council and with town staff, this precedes existing staff, existing council. Nobody can say that we have not thoroughly vetted this issue. And, we have gone through multiple, site analysis, feedback, budget analysis. Do we need it? Do we not need it? If we need it, how big does it need to be? It's good for small dogs, but then doesn't serve the big dogs. One thing that I'm not comfortable with is the idea that people can just break the law with their dogs off leash just because they feel like it's inconvenient, that they have to go somewhere to legally recreate with their dog. I don't think that that's appropriate. The town pays, I think it's $5,000 a year to provide cleanup bags for dogs throughout town. I'm not sure that, I'm sorry?
We're approaching $10,000 now.
$10,000, okay. You also can't say that this is not a dog-friendly town. So we do what we can. But I agree almost to a letter with Councilmember Dutton on this, that it just, we have looked, we have considered all the options. It just doesn't work for Yountville. There were people that would be supportive of a park, and then you go near their neighborhood and they say, except for here, you can't have it here. And I do think we have to equally respect our businesses. Just because it's not somebody's residential development, it doesn't mean that that business development isn't going to be negatively impacted. I'm concerned about the impact on traffic into Gateway Mobile Home Park. We're totally reconfiguring that street, adding more parking down there, and adding 25 housing units, as has been addressed tonight. So there's a lot that's already going on down there. So I think it would be a mistake to try to force a park into that space. And I agree also with Councilmember Dutton. I would not vote in favor of anything that's going to carve up Veterans Memorial Park. I mean, just by the name, the symbolism of that park to our community, I think, makes it untouchable unless we're going to try to do serious improvements in its overall beauty, which I think we have been doing. But I think that we'd be risking, as was stated, to do harm rather than good, and I just don't think that it's worth that risk. So reluctantly, I can't support it. I've gone back and forth over the years on this idea. I'd love to have, I'm a new dog owner myself. My dog lives in Phoenix, but I do expect him to visit. I feel for all the dog owners that really want a convenient place to let their dogs run. Since I'm not the owner of the vineyards just to the east of town, I certainly see a lot of dogs out there, and they seem to be having a good old time. Again, that's not my responsibility. It's county area and private property, but like I said, reluctantly, I can't support it, but I hope, the discussion, at least, people appreciate the fact that we have thoroughly vetted this and all sides have been considered, and we can move forward.
Thank you for those comments. I have a high-energy little dog. Very short legs, and he's fast. And it would be great to be able to take him somewhere and run him off leash, to wear him out so I can sleep at night. So what I do is I take his little rubber ball and I throw it down the hallway about 53 times, and that pretty much wears him out. Yountville, unfortunately, we're a small town and we really don't have a place for a dog park. A dog park that would, like Councilmember Moeller said, we would, if we did, and if we had the place for it, and if we had the money for it, we would do it right. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Not only do we not have the funding for it to build the dog park, there's the issue of maintenance and care for the dog park. and not having a place to situate a dog park in Yountville, I can go with the second option, and that is kill the issue, and move forward and drop the whole topic of a dog park in Yountville. Do you need any kind of...
The council needs to take a minute order action so that the official actions can be noted, if there's a motion.
I'll move that we stop the process of evaluation and potential construction of a dog park in Yountville.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. That motion carries. Thank you. Sorry to all the dog owners, but where there's a will, there's a way. You'll find a way to exercise your dog. Bounce the ball off the side of the garage 53 times. It'll do it. Thank you.
Take care.
If Mr. Housley would, we'll take a moment while everybody's transitioning, and we will return to the agenda item for the Chamber of Commerce annual report.
The Chamber Board President is here, and while we're setting up for that meeting, or that presentation, I will ask that Vice Mayor chair this session, or section of the council presentation, as the Chamber of Commerce is my primary employer, and I will be stepping down and leaving the council chambers.
Thank you, Mayor. So we get back to item 8C, Chamber of Commerce Marketing and Promotions Services Annual Report.
Thank you for having me, Vice Mayor, council members. Sorry I'm late. Came from another volunteer meeting I had to go to before here. So I got to get used to this, sorry. Okay, yeah, that works. Okay, so the mission statement we like to post every year to let everybody know where we're at. The Yountville Chamber of Commerce, governed by a volunteer board of directors, shall actively market the town of Yountville and chamber members to promote tourism and local businesses while contributing to the quality of life for the community. We developed that a few years back because we wanted to make sure that it incorporated a little bit of everything, especially because we're not the typical, when people think of chamber, we don't do the whole business side in here fighting for businesses as much as we are just for the marketing and promotion of the town. And we'll show you some slides in a bit to confirm that. I'm going to hit a couple things tonight, and I'll try to zoom through them so we don't have to spend too long. Were you able to get copies of the presentation prior, so you've got it in hard copy, so you've got some of our notes and everything too, in case you want to jot down any questions as I go through. So last year, our goals that we posted to you guys were to, number one, look into a business improvement district tax, set up some business forums, do events, mixers, B2Bs, website overhaul, you know, the whole thing. Basically, in looking at that, a couple things came up. Number one, once we started going forward with the T-bid idea, it actually turned out that the county had already started getting the ball rolling. We took a step back, went to our business members, specifically the hotels, and said, how do you guys want to proceed? Do you want us to support you with this, to go on with the county? Do you want to do this on your own? You know, how do you want to do it? So we tried to kind of get people together and at least get them to speak about it and discuss it, because the T-bid will kind of act as its own, it'll take its own, morph into its own thing. There will be a committee, I don't know, I'm assuming you guys are fully aware of it. I shouldn't be explaining to you, but I know it's a public thing also. There will be 4 hoteliers on the board to decide this. 1 chamber member, a town person, either, I would assume, either a town manager or one of the council members, and then a person from the community to help guide the funds that are going to be coming in to use for specific marketing. Let me click one more just in case. Yeah, we're not there yet. Okay, so I just wanted to see if I needed to move forward. Business forums we also wanted to get into. As last year we got into and did a couple to start. We did one on traffic and parking, looking into transportation, ride-share type programs. We continue to look into the Yellow Bike program to no avail. Recently we did a food waste composting one. We always kind of partner with the town Since Ruben Oropeza left the health department, I'm having trouble getting the health department to allow us to continue to do the food service safety classes, both in English and Spanish, which we were the first ones to do the little classes of those. So we're trying to kind of help the businesses, make sure we're hitting the good A grades in all of our restaurants and everything else. Events, we hit the 2nd annual Chili Cook-Off, the 5th annual Veterans Day Celebrity Chefs Luncheon, the 21st annual Festival of Lights, and the 17th annual Taste of Yountville. Both the Chili Cook-Off and the Veterans Day are specifically for the locals. And if you guys haven't had a chance, I know you guys have all volunteered for the Veterans Day Luncheon. The other community members should really try to get there. It's a great event, as is the Chili Cook-Off, even though I'm still bitter about the results from last year. Yeah. It was the firefighters again, wasn't it? So the mixers, we continue with the mixers that we've always done. It's kind of been a little bit of a social event for the associate members, and we started a kind of a business expo situation with what we call the B2BE, business to business exchange. It's been great. It gets a chance for each of the businesses to kind of talk about what they do. They can get up there, speak about new catering ideas that they have, and meet the other new managers because there's so much turnover in the current economy at times. So then we can kind of re-network and say, hey, here's who's where, and they get to meet each other. So that's been going well. The website was the one thing that we didn't feel that we totally hit last year because we went to a company called Total Chamber. They've got what we're moving forward. It's looking great. They were supposed to launch before May. It was supposed to happen in April. And if anybody's ever worked with a web designer, it never seems to hit because I think they all are up all night and sleep all day. So we are close. We're supposed to be launching June 1 now. We'll see if we hit it. But we're very close to relaunching the Yountville.com website with Google Maps, search engines, all the stuff that people are expecting now. PR and marketing. Coley Communications continues to meet and exceed our expectations, and they incorporate innovation and creativity to their marketing. The marketing binder will be, it's around here somewhere. You guys will get a copy of that. This year it got a lot thinner because we have a lot of it digital now, so you can kind of have it in file for people to access when the time comes. So the goals for this year, some of them very similar again, is to continue with local, national, international marketing and PR. The Ambassador and Concierge Program. This is the newest thing for us. The Ambassador Program to get the Board of Directors to really know the benefits of being involved with the Chamber, people coming into town. There's a lot of different kind of ways we want to morph the Ambassador Program for people coming in, both business members and visitors to the community. The Concierge Program is also something that we're looking to do. All the travel and tourism surveys have said everybody's going to San Francisco first and then coming. So the idea is to get somebody and get it where we're actually getting a program to get into the city, meet the concierge, let them know about how cool Yountville is, and go from there. I won't touch on the website again because we don't need to. Business information seminars, we're going to continue to move forward with those. We'd like to get the food handling classes back up because those are crucial, we feel. And continue with composting, which looks to be moving forward. I've spoken to actually a couple of you on an individual basis about the idea of what the local restaurants want to do with composting and how it's the right thing to do, and so we've had a pretty good response with that. Continuing with the mixers and then also these special events. We're very content with how they've moved by taking them in-house. The Chili Cook-Off we feel was a huge success, and the Veterans Luncheon also we're going to continue that way. So the town contract expectations are to retain marketing and public relations. Coley Communications and the Clip Service continue to be doing a very good job. I don't think we can take credit for it. We may be able to, but on Sunday, I'll throw this with it too, on the homepage of Yahoo, Bartisono was pictured on the homepage of Yahoo on Sunday. The Bartisono Project, it was talking about the best new hotels in the country. And they were one of the top 10 that was listed. But the actual picture that went up on the homepage of Yahoo, which is, there's a fair amount of traffic that goes through there. Not quite as much as Ranch Market, NapaValley.com. But, we're very content with the direction we're going with that, and we want to continue with those efforts with local PR because obviously that continues to bring TOT in, which we know is our big boy for revenue. The website, we want to get that up and running. With the budget, you'll see that we've dropped down the website sales. We're trying to make sure we don't oversell it where it becomes very advertisement-based and more visitor-based, people coming where they can get the services, the contacts, and everything they need. The Visitor Center, let's see if we've got it on here. So, real quick, sorry, media coverage. Sorry, I forgot I had a slide for each of these. Media coverage, this last year, according to ad equivalency, which we know how that can be at times, but at the same time, we had huge ad equivalency with some of them. There's a list of all the publications that got hit in the binder itself. I couldn't get it all under the slides of this. It was supposedly equal to $136 to every dollar we spent towards PR this past year. We're looking to get the high-end foodie market, boost the important midweek off-season travel, glean the important cultural travel market share, grow new market segments, and enhance bookings and revenues. There was a few places that we did hit, some of the big boys, New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, KGO, KPIX. Some of you saw the Yountville segment that we got. As for the website, like we said, we're going to be trying to launch that off. We've come up with a very new look. We looked at a lot of websites, Aspen, and some really cool destination locations that are very agricultural-based or outdoorsy type places. A lot of pictures, very simplified, not so many advertisements, so we wanted to keep it real clean and nice looking. The Visitor Center, I remember when we actually came to the town for the increased budget, because the Visitor Center used to be located in the old community center. It was very small. A busy day would be 35 people. A really busy day. Sometimes I think we remember Jack could vouch for it. Dottie was in there for a long time. I think on the year we were doing 4,500 people on a total year. We moved it in 05, so you can see where it was kind of going. And then when it goes from 03 to 05, we jumped it over 20,000 people just by moving it to the new location. We were paying very minimal because we were paying the town for it. But you guys were wanting the space, you were looking into the community center project, and we had a chance to move it to a location that was earlier in the town where people could start using it a lot easier, and you can see what the traffic has done. What we found now, because we're having a little bit of a drop-off, a couple things, the economy, and we're having a lot of repeat visitors. Once you've gone to a place and gotten information, you don't really need to go back to the information center every time again, because now you think you know it. So we're happy with that. We did extend the hours last year like we promised from 10 to 5 because we had so many people after 3 o'clock showing up. And that's why that changed at that point. Other produced materials, the e-newsletters, walking tour map, Yountville Guide, Chamber Chat, Meet the Candidates. We've got a lot of publications that we're putting out there. There's ideas out to do a different map that would incorporate a lot of different things. There's a fitness map. I mean, we're really trying to make sure we try to touch on all different areas without going overboard because of the cost of all the printing. The special events, needless, we don't really need to say much about the Taste of Yountville. The success this year, for everybody that wanted to complain, unfortunately, it's one of those things, if you own a restaurant and you buy 400 chicken breasts and 800 people show up and all want chicken, I mean, you can't do much about it. It was crazy. We tripled some of our numbers. The average amount spent, what we've seen in the past, was about $45 to $50 a person. We saw over $100 a person on average, at least from the numbers we were hearing. It was crazy. Weather was beautiful. The whole event turned out very good, but we had to learn a few things in the process. We were serving people out of plastic cups and everything we could to make it continue. And so we've learned from that. The Chili Cook-Off, Yountville Days Parade and Festival, we assist in and have for years, and then the Chef's Luncheon and the Festival have been continuing, and we continue to go with those. Business education. These are the things we're going to be touching on this year. We're having some signage issues. The people at the north end of town, the businesses, are saying, because it says Visitor Center with an arrow, they turn in and then all of a sudden show up there in Washington Square and say, where's the Visitor Center? So we're going to try to change that sign, come back to you guys or the sign ordinance committee or whoever we have to do to approach and say, should we put 0.3 miles or whatever to get them down to the actual Visitor Center and spare those businesses? Gerard, I think, aren't they located right there? They probably would appreciate that. And Rose. Signage, PR and marketing, and continuing the B2B exchanges and all. So we're looking to continue with that stuff. Community outreach, the mixers, special events. We're looking to, and we've tried it in the past, we're still going forth with local promotions in terms of trying to do things. One of the things that we're liking was this last year, Coley Communications came up with the idea of the Movable Feast, which was... at first, people were like, gosh, is that really what we want to do? And it seemed like a great idea, and it really turned out to be a huge, huge hit. And what was nice was it gave just people a price that they could go and hit any of the local restaurants, and there was kind of a preset menu. People really liked it, so then a lot of people that were on a little bit more of a certain budget could actually go out and enjoy some of these restaurants. It was a great idea, so we're very happy with that. And as much as we continue to encourage buy local by having discount programs, it's hard because a lot of the shops are trying to do what they can to make their square footage price. So the idea of giving everybody discounts because they live in town or things like that, that's got to be on a business by business basis. So we still do it. Quite a few do. If you're a chamber member, you get it, and the associate members, a lot of people do it so they can get that. Economic reporting, I threw this in there. This is just information. You guys have it. It's just talking about where we are, where the state is currently in terms of the state and how things have been dropping. We are very lucky to not be dropping at the rate. The town of Yountville sales changed by 7.3% when the state was at 5.6, correct? Negative. So even if we are at an upward trend, if nothing, I would be very happy with a flat trend right now in the current economy. And I know, I believe, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, that our TOT was within $3,000 of our banner year recently, which is a good sign.
The last month reflects that.
Last month reflects that.
For that month reporting period.
Right. So these are just a couple quick slides to just throw it in here. I tried to show color change when the TOT increased from 10% to 12%. When we presented originally in that election cycle, we talked to all the council members, the people running, and said, do you think we should reinvest? What should we do? And that was about that time frame. You can see where it did take quite a jump. Also, at the same time, we had more hotel rooms. So it's a hard number to really show, to show all of those things. These are a few things just to keep in mind. Carmel by the Sea for marketing and TOT revenue, and then what they spend on marketing and information services is 11%. We spend 6%. So, which is fine. I'm just trying to give you guys a ballpark because a lot of people look at it and say, well, this is a big, and it is a big chunk. But at the same time, that's almost half of what Carmel is spending. If we were to look just at Calistoga alone, Calistoga is running at 8% in the last couple years. And we're still, like I said, we're running at 6% on the last couple years. So what we're trying to do is you've got a full budget that you can look at. Last year I tried to put it in a slide, and it was kind of really difficult to read, if you remember that one. So what we did was we said, let's put it under as this is a service contract, and that's the way it's always been written up. So we wanted to come across and say, look, here's what we're throwing out for you for $225,000. The Visitor Center, covering a portion of the Visitor Center, $25,000. We've got rent. We've got all the overhead and things that go into the Visitor Center. The staffing of that, the Festival of Lights, the Taste of Yountville, the town lighting. You can see that the Chamber has also coverage in each of those areas. PR, we did it about 75% on that one, and then the PR marketing, those are additional expenses. At the bottom, I put other, see full budget. There's $61,000 of $4,000 for advertising, and little numbers here and there that we could go through each of those. And like I said, you've got copies of all that when you guys actually get to the budget portion of the meeting, or not this meeting, but when you go over to do budget stuff. Because we didn't feel that putting everything down on a slide like this was going to really do it any justice. It was going to be very difficult to see it all. So the point being is you can see that the budget that we're even looking at for this year is $438,000. The town funds $225,000 of that. And it was specifically agreed upon to put on events, to market the town, to make sure we're taking care of a visitor center and supporting the people coming into town so then they're not parking in residential neighborhoods, not going and walking around cluelessly and doing whatever. So we wanted to be where we're providing them with a good service. So this is how we broke it down this year. Like I said, you've got both versions. So the last year we decided to pass on the increase. It is in the contract that we get the CPI increase each year of the contract. We're going into our third year now of the 3-year contract. We passed on it the last year because the Taste of Yountville was so successful. We actually are going to go ahead and pass on it again. It's approximately, from what my calculations were, $23,000 that we did that should have actually gone into it. We could have found things to try to buy, computers, whatever, more signage, more maps, something. But we chose to pass on that again because we know it's been tough the last couple of years. So we wanted to just note that and then open it up for Q&A.
Questions? Councilmember Mueller?
Yeah, I would like some clarity on your service proposal, the little menu list here. Festival of Lights has a a line item next to it, as well as town lighting. So what I'm looking for is an explanation, what's the difference between the Festival of Lights and the town lighting?
So what was happening was when you're trying to run a nonprofit, you're like, okay, here's how much money I have, here's how much it's costing, here's how much we're bringing back in. And what was happening was every year we were looking at our budget going, man, the festival is a huge money suck. We're bringing in, there's a lot of people, it's very successful, people love it, but we pay for lights for a month, and we're trying to put it into a one-day event. So what happened was the town actually was one, I think it may even have been back with, was it with you, Steve, or was it back with Kevin, where they said, you should probably put it as its own line item, because technically you're lighting the community hall, or the community center now, which was a little bit of the increase, and other areas of the town. The businesses are doing their thing separate. So what we did was we decided to put the town lighting in a separate, so then you can kind of see each of the events separate. Back before I was president, or even when I started as president, we used to present you guys with an operating budget, a marketing budget, a Festival of Lights budget, a Taste of Yountville budget, and then an overall. And it was hard for me to follow, and I was the one that helped put it together. And that's the way they had always done it. And finally I said, we need to simplify. If it's all out on the table, if this is a partnership, we need to just throw it all out there. So what we did was we tried to break it down and make it a lot simpler. So the town lighting portion is $38,000. We used to pay 5 years ago, I think we paid $20,000. And do you remember when we had like the one strand through each tree, and it looked, every other tree actually
And then
looked
it went
horrible.
out after a while, too.
And then they were out. Yeah, it was not pretty. So, part of that, part of it, what we're looking to do, hopefully, and hopefully the TBID group that does come forward, what we're saying is, hey, the idea, similar to the Festival of Lights with the Yountville Days. When Yountville Days came around, finally I said, look, I've been in town since I went to kindergarten next door. And why do we call it the Yountville Days Parade, and we spend one afternoon for 4 hours and call it good? So then they started doing the dinner dance, and they started doing the movie night, and we all talked about it. We said, oh, this is a great idea. And then came the idea of the chili cook-off again to kick it back off. So it became an event. Well, Festival of Lights was the same idea. The idea is to have carriage rides through that whole month of December to continue to keep some people in the hotel rooms. The restaurants would appreciate a few more guests, especially midweek. But those things are expensive. We've kicked around an ice rink. You think a dog park's an issue? Try an ice rink. So I think we're trying to get things to get people in and call it a festival and take it through the whole month. And lighting it, we went from lighting it until January 1, and now we could hold it longer because so many people like the lights for the winter months because it's kind of brightens you up a little bit when we get 30 days of rain. So it's the idea of it, and basically that was just asked to be separated out a while back.
And then just one more quick question. Like Taste of Yountville, how much was your gross after how much you take in?
Yes. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay.
I
I'm just curious.
believe we took in almost $80,000. Now, with that, the tenting, rental, and everything was up because we had more booths than we've ever had. We ran out of glasses. We ran out of many things. But the numbers were up, so the rental was up, and there was a lot of issues in that sense. But yes, we brought in additional revenue. The Festival of Lights did not hit the revenue numbers because the weather wasn't great. It was close. So.
But you get back a big chunk of that to the people that are there, correct? I mean, the money that comes in,
Yeah, I believe, if I remember correctly, we budgeted last year for...
12,000. That's 12,000.
Is it 12,000?
Yeah.
Not the merchandise.
In higher, though.
What's that?
It says event proceeds distribution.
Yeah,
Budget was
distribution, 12,000. We kicked it up to 20, and I want to say we paid almost 28 or 29,000 this year in distribution. So as much as we were budgeted for 12, we had to throw an extra 17 because everybody was so busy and successful. And there was a few other things that came up too. Tickets. We got a lot of tickets from God knows where. And so we're going to be printing our own tickets that say Yountville on them. They will be done. And we will have extra. We are going to be purchasing extra glasses to put in the shed to have them ready to go. So when we need them. Ironically, we had never done more than 2,400 glasses, I think, ever in an event. We had 2,800 on hand. We thought, great, we're fine. We don't even have to purchase any this time around. And we were out by 1 o'clock. I mean, who would have thought that it would have been that crazy of an event? So great in many senses, but still tough.
Councilmember Chilton, any other
Well,
comments?
I think this is the this coming fiscal year is the third year of the
Yes.
the contract, and I do want to say that the chamber deserves great credit for not taking the CPI increase that is in the contract. That is a highly unusual thing for someone to do, so I think that's very appreciated, especially in tougher budgetary times. I would look at, as opposed to what the budget is next year, of thinking to 6 months from now, and the discussion between the town and the chamber comes up about renewing that contract, is looking at items that really contribute to, I think, increasing the total take of the town. And one of those things I think is, you made a mention of it, the Christmas lights in town now cost $38,000. And I kind of have this feeling that the town has always done that, and we have now taken that and put it off to the chamber. And if we were having a budget discussion and said next year we're going to spend $38,000 putting up Christmas lights for 6 weeks, I have a feeling our discussion on that might be a little bit different. So apparently somebody might agree.
Well, let me correct you. If you paid for it, it would cost you a lot more than $38,000.
I agree with that, yeah. So I think it's worthwhile for the chamber to go through and say what's really driving business for business. The second piece of it is, if you go through the budget, I hear a lot of people talk about it, but the town puts in $225,000. The expectation for next year on the business is $58,000. And there's over $100,000 that are generated from the events. And I'm a business owner. I'm a chamber member. I pay my $300 a year, I think it is, for my size of business. I think it makes a statement to the community when the business community puts in 25% of what the town does. The question is whether the business community really feels like putting in extra dollars is going to generate more dollars for business. I think that's something that does need to be proactively addressed in the future. And being able to answer that question is probably something that will allay some people's concerns over how much is appropriate for the town to be contributing. That's my only comments. But thank you. This is a very good chart.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dutton.
No, I'd just like to add that I know when I first moved to town, the first thing I did was volunteer at the chamber. So that was 13 years ago. All I've seen, especially since they moved, was just the increase in the professionalism of how it's run, the results, just everything in general. I mean, just the whole thing is fantastic. So I think it's certainly been on the right track. They've made a lot of adjustments, I think, to take advantage of what they have, and they've paid off. So I would just say to keep it going. I agree. I think it's very good, and to do it within the means that you've done it in is commendable.
Thank you.
I have a few comments, most positive, but not all. First
we
comment.
don't want the negative ones.
I'll start with the negative one.
My dog lives in Napa.
Yeah. Does he bite, Sergeant? Tasty Yountville. I agree. I was on the first shift, so I know how amazingly busy it was. But one negative takeaway I have from that is, for several years now, at least the last 2, if not 3, good weather, especially when we know it's coming, we've run out of glass. You have run out of glasses. You have run out of tickets. Your vendors have left early. And a lot of people think this is a town event. So it looks bad for Yountville. It obviously doesn't look good for your vendors either. I'm glad to hear that you're finally printing your own tickets, because I know they're counterfeit. I tell you, it's amazing what people will do to save $1 or $2. They'll use tickets that they go buy on their own or find on the street, whatever, which is mind-boggling, sometimes human nature. But running out of glasses, you should have 20,000 glasses. And now it sounds like you're finally going to have a backup supply.
Not 20,000, but
whatever. Hopefully you'll set a record every year. But I was concerned about the negative impact. Then we start to see letters to the editor about how upset we are. We're not coming back to Yountville. It's not we're not going to come back and support the Chamber of Commerce. So we're not going to come back to Yountville. So that concerns me, but I'm pleased to hear that you're already addressing it. It's not like this is anything new to you. But it just concerns me when we are spending over $200,000 a year to be partners with you. That said, I will be curious to see how the TBID money works in conjunction with your efforts, because I agree with Councilmember Dutton. The marketing effort the last few years especially has been fantastic, and we've gotten substantial national, international press, and I think that you folks deserve a good portion of that credit. I think, you know, Yountville sells itself to a degree, but certainly not on its own. One other question I had for you is what kind of impact or feedback have you received at the Chamber about the town's art committee's effort with the art walk, the sculptures that are in town? If you've heard any feedback, because locally we're pretty excited about what we're doing. I'm personally seeing people posing, taking pictures by the sculptures. It sounds like there's some good buzz. Are you sensing that the visitors are feeling that way too?
On a personal level, I think it's very cool. I like the flow. I like the way that I liked the point, the way that really turned out. Especially for somebody, I just remember how that used to kind of, as people zoom through that whole area, it was weird. We've heard different things. I can't tell you what. Aaron, maybe have you heard much?
Less comments than I thought. I've heard more from residents than I have.
So more from residents and visitors. That's Erin User, by the way. She's the new chamber executive assistant in there. And her parents walk their dogs in Yountville every day.
And they're on leash, I'm sure.
They are on leash. But I haven't heard anything on that side. It's all, more than anything for me, I hear it from residents. I'm between stores a lot, so I don't get a chance to talk to the visitors like I used to. But the residents, it's mixed feelings. It's just like any piece of art. You have somebody stand in front of the Mona Lisa, half of them think it's amazing, and half think she has a mustache. It's whatever you like and what you what you really appreciate. I've had a couple people say, "Oh, that looks like it needs to be an airport" on one of them, and others say, "Oh, that looks great." Everybody likes their own thing.
As long as you're talking about it.
Yeah. On the taste side, I don't disagree with you. That's partly why we took them back in-house. What we found was the same things continued to not get fixed, or at least that's the way the committee was getting after us, saying, look, we keep saying this every year and it's not improving. And then when we upped it again, thinking we're good. And what happens is frequently is the wineries will say, great, we'll be there, we'll bring 2 cases of wine. We're like, you got to bring at least 5. And they're surprised, and then they see the number. So I think it's been one of those things that every year, same thing with food. I mean, fortunately, we've got people like Bob Hurley who runs back into his restaurant. He was doing rabbit pot pie with a little crostini thing in it, I believe. It was very good. And I walked back an hour later and said, oh, you got to go try this. And I walk up, and they walk away with a corned beef sandwich. And he's like, well, I ran out. I made do. You got to give him credit. The people are there. Could he say, oh, sorry, I'm out of food, go into my restaurant instead? Yeah, I mean, he could, but he was back. I know quite a few people were back out there. So I know you guys did a couple pounds of chicken salad. It was crazy how many people. So yes, we continue to up it. The plan is to buy 5,000 glasses, at least 5,000 glasses. It depends when we get bigger buy, we can get better pricing, as long as you guys allow us the space in the shed. Because it's just a matter of spacing and where we can go with it, and then just because we can replenish. But to think that we even went through those that fast was just crazy this year. So.
Well, and I'll agree. And somewhat in the Chamber's defense, I mean, glasses are not perishable items like food is. But on Wednesday of that event, I upped because of the weather, I upped what I expected to have from the previous year by 50%, and we still ran out at 2:30. It may have been before that. It could have been 2. I mean, it really was a tremendous event. So I think that resets probably for all of us, and food included, what we're going to do next year, and it better not rain.
Well, it makes me also think of something like when Steve brought up that we're within $3,000 of our banner year. As much as a lot of people are saying, gosh, the economy's down, I know you guys are dealing with budget cuts or reduced budget. It's hard because we're going into a year that it's showing that things could be very strong right now. And hopefully they are. I mean, I could be wrong, and they talk about the double dip and, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, if we stay ahead of the game by continuing to market and do PR, I mean, my biggest complaint when the TBID group came to us is I said, you better plan on including us because we've been doing it for 7 years, and you guys are just coming on going, hey, how's this for an idea? and we've been doing it successfully. So if you want us to help you make it happen and get people to Napa Valley, and then ultimately to our destination alone, we'll help you out. But it's got to be a team effort, because we have restaurants and hotels, the Bartisono and the Yountville down the road, and things that will bring people here, and we want to continue to do that, but keep the ambiance that we have.
Sure. Great. Any other questions or comments from council? Thank you for your presentation. And with that, I'll invite Mayor Sossman to return. If somebody could.
I have the TV on for in there. TV. Do you say martini or TV? TV. What did you say? I heard something else.
Okay. Well, certainly.
The little TV is on. TV. It's down on the bottom. Second one. It was earlier, at least. I usually know better.
You know where her PowerPoint is?
That one I don't.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, for that little nap.
It was shown as the second one. It's been eliminated.
Do you want to continue or take a quick break?
Just PowerPoint. I didn't
Continue
remove
with
anything.
people doing
Okay. The next item is public hearing J. Gregory Sellers. Before we...
Actually, may I clarify a bit for you what this issue is?
Certainly.
This is not a public hearing. This is this is a concept presentation of a proposal by a local applicant, and we want to break it into two elements for you. Typically, the council has expressed a willingness to entertain concept proposals. And a concept proposal is where somebody brings an idea to the council that is at a level of development and asks for some feedback and direction from the council prior to them making a formal application to the town. Tonight, what you have before you actually has two different considerations, and staff will go through the presentation in more detail, but what we ask that the council, the audience here and the audience at home recognize, if there are two stages to this particular concept review. The first separate consideration is whether the potential request for rezoning should be considered or entertained, and that stands alone on its own merit regardless, and I want to repeat, regardless of the potential use. In here, I also want to point out we have a very unique situation. The property in question, the information or what's currently constructed on that site predates the town's incorporation. That's the important thing for everybody to realize. Planning staff will go into more detail, but you couldn't build what's on that site today in conformance with our general plan. And the zoning is Old Town Historic, it's residential. Staff will go into that in more detail, but what you need to realize is what's there predates the incorporation of the town, 1965, does not conform, could not be built today. Second part of the request is the applicant's going to propose to you what they might want to do with the property if it were to be rezoned. And again, when you provide feedback and direction on that concept review, you want to focus exactly on that to the anticipated use that they're doing. So a little more time and effort up front explaining what you have here, because it is a very unique and different concept review. And again, I want to stress there's no formal application. We will take, obviously, public input and everything, but this is the applicant that's going to share with you some of their ideas and thoughts about how to potentially, how they would like to use this site and get some feedback from the council. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Associate Planner Sandra Smith.
And before we begin, thank you for that clarification, Town Manager. Unfortunately, I have to declare a conflict of interest and step down as my primary residence is within 500 feet of the proposed project application change.
And can I ask just for clarification from town staff? The original concept that was your stage 2, not the zoning, but the use had to do with a wine tasting room and deli, and it's my understanding that they have changed that request.
Well, I think that's what we understand, but the application as it was submitted and what was presented is for a tasting room and deli. Now, the hard part on this is so much of the conversation is going to overlap the two issues, but I would premise that you do not have a conflict on the rezoning. There may be a perceived or potential conflict when you deal with the use discussion. So I'll ask for some clarification.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, I would exercise caution, however, because if you grant or deny the zoning, that either opens the door or shuts the door on a potential use that could or could not use. It could include a deli. So if I can ask a question maybe for you, if Councilmember Chilton were to recuse himself from the initial conversation, and as the application comes forward, it changes, he'd be welcome to return to the conversation. Yes.
Yeah, well, can I just get clarification on whether the applicant, because we don't even have an application.
No, this is conceptual tonight, and if it were to come back for a decision, that would be under a formal application. So I don't know if the conceptual nature of tonight's item and no decision would affect the conflict issue.
Because if the conceptual discussion includes a deli, it does. That triggers the threshold question.
I agree with that.
And so, and if I were sitting in your shoes, council member, I wouldn't participate. But if the applicant, who doesn't have an application in yet, is going to indicate that this project may include a deli, I think that will lead you down a conclusion that you would be best served not to participate.
If they're, do you say that correctly? If they indicate they are going to have a deli, I should not participate.
Or if that's part of their plan,
if it's not
now
part of,
or in the future.
If it's not part of their plan now or in the future,
then that changes.
That changes.
Correct. But the concept review that we are taking on right now, as is presented in the packet as a public concept, includes a deli concept.
Right. I'm just trying to reconcile the.
What I would have to clarify, at this point, the public information, the applicant will be able to speak later, and if they change formally and present their application at that time, but
Is it possible to get clarification on that?
The applicant has just indicated that they've withdrawn the deli concept. I'm presenting the concept at the dais tonight that wasn't included in the packet, which may affect the discussion.
That certainly assists, and then at this point, Councilmember Chilton may participate. So even though, as was publicly noticed, this concept included a deli, the revision of it prior to our discussion removes the conflict. Yes, because as I understand the record to be at this point, the representative of the applicant has informed our associate planner, who has articulated into the record that the deli concept has been withdrawn. Councilor Chilton, are you comfortable?
Yes, I am. Unless they make me uncomfortable in the future.
And with all that, to get the final legalese
Thank you for the clarifications.
out of the way, I did have a phone conversation with a representative of this application who introduced some of the general concepts that are going to be presented this evening. So I wanted that stated for the record as well. And with that, let's move forward with item 10, which is a concept review, not a public hearing, but a initial concept review. J. Gregory Sellers, Rossi Concept at 6548 Washington Street, APN 036-060-012. And may we have a staff report, please?
Good evening. The item before you is a conceptual proposal for the redevelopment of the project. And if the applicant is seeking your input and direction tonight before they decide whether to proceed with formal applications for general plan amendment, rezone, and ultimately a master development plan, which would include design review for buildings and a use permit for any potential use. And as the town manager mentioned, it is important to split these two different concepts when you consider it tonight. The general plan and rezone would change the land use designation on the property for sometime in the future, and that's a long-term vision for the property, whereas the specific use is something that is potentially changeable. Tenants come and go, so one doesn't lock in the other. And as we noted, there is additional information at each of your seats regarding the revised concept, and I'll go into that later in the discussion. So this slide shows the subject property, and it's a Washington Street fronting property that's situated 2 parcels south of Humboldt Street. This is a copy of the town zoning map, and this is a closer view. And this is the parcel right here. It's located at the southernmost section of the Old Town Historic District. It's immediately north of the residential scaled commercial and would result in a continuation of that zone if it's rezoned. And the property at the corner of Humboldt and Washington is the Gates Estates property, and that is what is known as a retained use. It's a commercial use within the Old Town Historic District, which is residential. So the first concept we'll consider tonight is whether it's necessary or appropriate to rezone that property from a land use designation of residential to a land use designation of commercial. And we look to the general plan to help inform us of the town's goals and visions. And the general plan provides that Washington Street is the town's main street, and that it creates the focus for the commercial and civic activities. The general plan defines the central business core as the area between Humboldt Street on the north end and California Drive on the south. And this section of the zoning map shows that other than this parcel and the retained use, which is the Gates Estate to the north, all other properties are zoned commercially facing Washington Street. This area is intended to have a concentration of retail uses and a pedestrian orientation with the cohesive building frontage. And the subject parcel, as it is developed residentially, creates a break in this vision. This section in the Gates Estate property is sort of a holdover from the Old Town District in an area that has predominantly become commercial. And if the town were to move forward with a general plan amendment and rezone, staff thinks it is valuable to look at the potential rezone of the Gates Estate property. Since it's used commercially and it's known as a retained use, it would eliminate the retained use designation so that its zoning matches the use on the property. A change in the land use designation from residential to commercial would reinforce Washington Street as the center of town and, like I said, connect with an existing retained use. I think it's important when considering the rezone to evaluate the uses that could occur on the property as it's currently zoned. And as the staff report notes, commercial uses are not allowed. Those are only allowed on retained use sites. And there are the asterisks on the map, and you can see there's, other than Gates Estates, there are 3 other retained uses in the Old Town Historic Zone. So it's really appropriate to look at what the maximum residential development of the property could be. And it's a 7,140 square foot parcel. And if it were developed with a single-family residence and second dwelling, that would be a use very consistent with the Old Town District. And developed at a floor area ratio of 25%, it would allow something on the order of a 1,700 square foot building. The parcel, however, also could be developed with multifamily uses, and a multifamily use allows a higher FAR of 40%, or the equivalent of approximately 2,850 square feet of building area. What staff did was try to look at the maximum residential density based on that floor area ratio and looked at the design ordinance because that establishes the maximum density when you consider the setbacks, the parking, and all the different development standards. And we tried to see if 5 residential units could fit on the site. And 5 units would require 8 parking stalls, and with the driveway access, it would really preclude a development of that size because the minimum necessary area for those components would exceed the parcel size. It would be difficult to develop the site with 4 units, but it is feasible to see 2 or 3 units with the 4 parking stalls that are required, the access, and the open space. I would like to note that here in the recent past, when we had an application for a duplex in the Old Town Historic Zone, it received some opposition, and granted that was deeper within the district and not on the edge, but that applicant ultimately abandoned the duplex idea and proceeded with a single-family residence proposal that is now under construction. So we've encountered some opposition to multifamily use in the past. As Steve noted, this was developed prior to the town's ordinances, so it's what's known as a legal nonconforming use. And the town code provides that if a legal nonconforming use is destroyed by a fire, that it could be redeveloped. And the staff report noted that there were 4 residences on this property. I've confirmed with the applicant since that there are actually 5. So 5 residential units could be redeveloped, which is considered nonconforming and which would not meet today's development standards. So this is important to consider when you're evaluating the potential rezone from a residential to a commercial use, and really the town's long-term vision for Washington Street and what it wants for its downtown commercial core. The reason I also bring up the 5 residential units and whether that number of units could be developed on this site is because the town's inclusionary ordinance and the requirement for affordable housing units kicks in at 5 single-family residential units, a development of that size, or a subdivision of 5 or more units. So that the ordinance, so the inclusionary housing ordinance and the requirement for a minimum number of affordable housing units doesn't technically apply to this size property, given the constraints that it has. Which brings me to my next issue, which is the requirement for replacement housing when we see a change in land use classification or the actual loss of units to construction. And the first program to be considered is the General Plan Housing Element Program 28. And it applies to the replacement of affordable housing units that are lost to new construction. And those units either need to be reconstructed on site or relocated to another site. And in this case, it's important to note that the existing residential units are classified as market rate units, even though they may be affordably priced due to their condition. The town's inclusionary housing ordinance has a strict definition of affordable housing unit, and that means that it is a unit that is required to be rented to for affordable rents and to a targeted household. It's an official designation that the property is managed by the housing authority under a regulatory agreement, that tenants meet income qualifications and that they go through a lottery for selection to live in the building. So a market rate unit that serves an affordable need is not necessarily an affordable housing unit. And since the inclusionary housing ordinance is not triggered, there could be a zero replacement under this program. There's another General Plan Housing Element Program 21, and this applies to the reclassification of a property from residential to commercial uses. And it includes a formula for the number of affordable units that should be provided on site, and it has 2 different prongs. The first is the minimum number of affordable housing units that are required of a residential development of the site. And again, I note that since it's not a development of 5 or more residences or a subdivision of 5 or more lots, there's potentially no affordable housing requirement. But there's a second prong that requires that the number of affordable housing units equal 1/2 of the number of full-time employees. And since the use on the property is not as concrete as the potential rezone, this number is somewhat up in the air and could be honed down in the future. The applicant, though, has generally indicated that the commercial uses could have 2 to 4 employees, which would require 1 to 2 affordable housing units. And that's a reasonable number that the property could accommodate based on the 1,071 square feet that would represent the 15% FAR for residential and the 2 parking stalls that would be required.
sorry to interrupt you here, but you just said 1 to 2 affordable housing units. Do you mean actually affordable housing units or market rate units that would be required?
No, this would be the formula for affordable units.
Okay.
And staff's evaluation of both those programs are really a strict interpretation of the code, and there could be leniency to require more affordable housing or less based on the specifics that apply to the project. Those are all of the issues that apply to the potential rezone and general plan amendment of the property, and is the first consideration before you. The next issues are the potential uses and the buildings that could accompany the change in use. And the residential scaled commercial district is the logical extension of the existing district, and so that would be the zoning that would apply if it were rezoned. That zone is intended for uses that support the daily needs of town residents, as you're well aware, and it does not permit uses that rely principally on tourists for their clientele. As you know, we've struggled at the staff level with this requirement because while there is a demand for local serving services and goods, the needs of town residents only seem to support a small number of local serving businesses, and what local serving is has been left to question. This is a mixed commercial and residential project that the applicant would ultimately like to proceed with. And as I noted, the original concept of the wine tasting and deli has been withdrawn. That has been replaced with the proposal at each of your seats. Let me move through these. This was the one that was eliminated, the wine tasting and deli, and this is now proposed. It shows a greater area of retail space, and in this case, it would be a furniture retailer at the front side of the building with the wine tasting area toward the rear and representing a smaller portion of the property. The second level would be devoted to the residents mainly, except this is shown as an office for that use. The applicant has indicated that they are interested in entering into a partnership with this furniture retailer. It is a retailer that was located in Rutherford that has lost their lease, and that they had an established business. And I'll allow the applicant to elaborate any further on this use, but at this point, this is what we know about the two uses. Which brings me to the development standards for any building that were placed on the site, and we have two different options. This is one where the project obtains its access off of Washington Street to a rear-situated parking lot, and we see a narrow 25-foot wide building. The main difference with the other option is that it requires cooperation of the neighboring property owner to the south, and it would require the elimination of 2 stalls in that neighboring lot to gain a direct connection to a rear lot. And it would be under an easement for access and also for the replacement of those 2 stalls in this lot. It results in a project that has a fuller property frontage and has more of the commercial presence that's the goal for Washington Street. Both of these options show the difficulty of accommodating all of the design ordinance requirements on a small parcel of this size, and the different aspects, the floor area ratio, the open space, the parking and access. But staff did attempt to give a quick review of the different elements as they're proposed, and notes that the commercial floor area ratio is below the 25% allowed in this zone, and the residential is below the 15% allowed in this zone. The open space has a requirement of a 25% minimum, and it's intended for unenclosed and usable areas. It's a difficult standard to meet when you consider the parking, the access, and building coverage. And so what we tend to see is open space that's visually usable but not always physically usable. And it's in the form of the perimeter planter beds around the parking lot, the building, and the smallest portion is shown as the front courtyard, which is the actual usable space. Another issue is the amount of open space for residential units, and those standards require a minimum of 100 square feet of directly accessible private open space, which isn't met in these drawings, but which illustrates that a private deck for each of those units, one or two units, would be necessary, since none of the ground floor open space can be considered private usable open space for them. And lastly, parking is really the other big issue that affects this property. As shown at the commercial square footage proposed, it meets the commercial standard of 1 stall for every 250 square feet, and that's 6 stalls. They're also meeting the standard for 1 residential unit of 1 stall for that unit, but if it were determined 2 units were needed, they'd need to find space for another stall or reduce the commercial square footage. Staff has been in discussion with the applicant about using finding innovative answers to the parking dilemma and using some different hydraulic or parking stacking systems that may be worth considering in the future, but those aren't before us tonight. So what the applicant is looking for is feedback on both these issues, both the general plan amendment and the rezone, which is separate from their concept for the wine tasting and furniture retail concept with the residential unit. And I'm free to answer questions.
Council have, I'm sure council has some questions of staff. We'll start with Councilmember Moeller.
I'd just like to ask one for now and then maybe come back. I just want some more clarity in terms of housing element program 21 and 28. So it was your opinion that, well, my first question has to do with, do you consider, I interpreted both of these to be additive, so that if replacement housing is needed based on program 21 and housing is needed based on commercial in terms of workforce housing for the employees, then these two would be additive.
Yes.
Okay. I'll come back for more later.
And just so I'm clear, what you're talking about is both would be required.
You would require, yes, the number in 21 plus the number in 28. That's what I mean by additive.
Councilmember Chilton?
My question was about housing element program 21. When I read it, and I have to actually go to the specific text, I suppose, of that housing element, because it says provides assurances that existing dwelling units and affordable housing opportunities that are lost due to reclassification of property. That word, existing dwelling units and affordable housing opportunities, now those are your words and not necessarily the ordinance. I'm thinking back to the, I mean, this goes back many years, to the rezoning of the potential French Laundry Inn property, where they were required, A, for affordable housing, and B, to replace the existing dwellings on that property, which they proposed to be relocated over onto Jefferson Street, and property that the applicant owned. Was that just a term of the deal, or I'd always understood that you had to replace existing housing stock?
That was a term of the deal, that to replace the existing market units, and they were not required to build those units, but provide the planning scenario that allowed them to be built by a subsequent buyer to the parcel, and the parcels would be have deed restrictions to that effect. And those are the 4 market units. Getting back to the underlying replacement for the affordable units that would have been required had the site been developed as residential. In the general plan housing element, there were, I believe, 7 sites identified that were large sites. These were included the Bardessono site, Yountville Inn, what was called the Schenkel site, that's the Girardi Place night housing site, and this housing site we're discussing for Keller. All of those had concomitant requirements for underlying affordable housing. Numbers were assigned to each one. This does not. And moreover, this doesn't even qualify for the requirement. The requirement kicks in at 5 housing units or 5 newly subdivided lots.
Right. Okay, so that So, but to go back to the original piece of that piece of property, the fact that there were existing market rate dwellings on there, that was, to your recollection, not a requirement of the housing element, but was part of the agreement to rezone that property?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I can just add a question of clarification, I believe, if I understood you correctly, that even though there are 5 existing units, they're not required to replace 5 existing units because they're non-conforming units. Is that correct? You said that they could only build as many as 3 and possibly 4 units on that site, given current
Well,
conditions?
that housing element policy kicks in when you can develop 5 or more units, and we tried to determine if this property could even be developed to that by the current standards, and it's not likely unless they were extremely small units on the order of 100 to 200 square feet in order to fit everything else. The parcel's just not that large.
And that's why nothing is triggered in terms of the other, like the housing situation that Councilmember Chilton referred to.
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Dutton, questions of staff?
Yeah, well, I guess I go back here, Bob, and a couple of things. Although it's a little off, you mentioned that in there about a duplex that it went in and everybody was shocked. And I mean, we do have duplexes in Old Town.
We have apartment buildings in Old Town, yes.
On Madison, those aren't duplexes there?
At the corner of Madison and Washington, those are apartment buildings. We have every variety, everything from multifamily, 6 units on down to duplexes, single family.
Yeah, I guess I'm back to saying, I guess I do need more clarification, because I turned here on page 4 when you mentioned that allowing them to remain in place, rebuild, or be destroyed is contrary to the protocol. But this important distinction is raised for the council because the 2 housing policies, and I assume you mean 21 and 28, would require replacement of, are we talking about 5 units now or 4? The second paragraph, the end of the second paragraph.
I would say that number is really up for consideration, that is not a locked-in number, that I would change this sentence now and put a number of 2 on it.
2. If they're additive, I would put 6. If you take 5 plus a minimum of 1/2 of 3 full-time employees, so I think we definitely lost a discussion here to figure out what we mean by housing element 21 and 28.
Yeah, I think staff needs to clarify the number of units that would be required to be replaced either on this site or potentially on another site, because that's something that I'm still not clear on either. That I understand that there's not an inclusionary element triggered because we're talking about fewer than 5 units on this parcel, but there are 5 existing units. Are they required to replace 4, 3,
No.
2,
No.
1?
The nature of the program 21 has to do with affordable units, replacement of affordable units, and there's a definition of what an affordable unit is. None of these qualify as affordable units. So the other second part of that program calls for when rezoning from residential to commercial, then 1/2 of the full-time equivalent employees units are provided for those. And then that becomes a number that yet to be determined, but it won't be a large number. It, as you would find in these other large projects, the Bardessono, Yountville Inn, it's going to be a small number. So that's what they're...
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Actually, I'd like to let staff just finish the thought,
Okay.
and then we'll ask questions once he's able to finish his thought.
In the context of the second paragraph that we were talking about here, was discussing replacement of non-conforming uses. These 5 units are non-conforming both in terms, mainly in terms of their zoning standards are exceeding yards, parking, FAR according to current standards. They couldn't be rebuilt to standard in the condition or location and siting they're in right now. And what this paragraph is saying is that we have a liberal, as they go, non-conforming standard. If it were to burn down, for instance, they could come in and, by approval of a use permit, replace them as they are now. They would have to secure that entitlement. However, and it's pointed out, many cities are much more, they want non-conforming uses to go away, and they put them on amortization schedules, and at a certain date in the future that's based on the useful life of the building, they're required to come into conformity. Here you can perpetuate one forever, or if it burns down, you can come in and ask for a use permit to replace it in the same position it's in now. That's what this is discussing in that paragraph. And the number, I think it was a speculation of how many were to burn down could they really realistically replace at that point. And I think at the time 4 was the understanding of what they had.
So, Councilmember Muller, you had a question?
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes back to when you were talking about the precise definition for affordable, which I think a lot of this really hinges on. Granted, we have an official definition for affordable because we've been recently talking about some Napa Valley community housing being officially affordable, whether it's, the low or the mid or the high. But when I went back and looked at our general housing element, we even discussed with the overlay for the 55-plus parks as those being affordable. Now, certainly they are. They are more affordable than a lot of our other housing stock, and I don't know what the rents are in these current, in this one house and the 4 or 3 apartments. I'm still kind of confused about that. But even though they might be classified by definition as market rate, I would like to know what the rents are because I would speculate that they're affordable. And,
The general plan policies that we're talking about have been incorporated into the inclusionary housing ordinance, and that's the document that has specific definitions on what affordability is, when the requirements come into play, what type of development would trigger those. And that's what staff applied to the analysis of this project. It's that very official designated term for affordable housing, and that's what distinguishes it from a property that may be affordably rented but is not subject to strict conditions.
Okay, so that's something we would have to take up in our findings and our deliberations, how we view affordable housing.
Well, I think advice from staff is that they don't meet the definition that's in the general plan as affordable housing units. They're affordable by virtue of their condition.
Right.
And that market price can float up and down with their condition.
So I'm going to take this direction back again because I still don't have an answer to my question of a few minutes ago, which is how many units are we talking about? I don't think it matters between the affordability as they are now versus, they are not by definition affordable housing units. They might be inexpensive, but they're not affordable by definition of a controlled income level. So let's not worry about that for the sake of my question. I'd like to know, what is this applicant in its current condition, what are they required to provide housing-wise?
And the answer is that it depends on the number of full-time equivalent employees. That's the sole requirement for replacement.
So I guess my question then is, how is it that it's left up to the applicant to decide? If they say they're going to have one full-time employee, then there's 1 unit. If they say they're going to have 10 employees, then they're required to have 5 units.
Right, and we've gone through this process once before. Only once before, and it was determined through a couple of meetings what, in the case of the application across from the French Laundry, what that number was, and that was eventually determined to be 11 for that one. We would have to look at the proposed use and come to the same discussion and decision.
So getting back to Sandra, your earlier part of this report was 5 cannot be built on there and be legally conforming. So some number below 5 is what's going to be required on here. If we go by what the applicant's potential employee status is, that's where you're getting potentially 2 units, if they're going to have 3 to 4 staff.
Yes.
So I guess I'd like to hear from, and this isn't really, I mean, we're still trying to ask questions of the staff report, so maybe something to consider for later is, does the council feel comfortable with that as the criteria? That purely based on the number of employees we're being told will be occupying the space, that's how many units, regardless of the fact that we have 5 units on the site now, and we'll lose some number of those 5. Councilmember Dutton.
Just one question, Bob, because you said the town has a flexible policy for replacement of these uses. Okay, you stop there. If we say, look, there's 5 units there now, irregardless of what we do, we want 5 units somewhere, either on there or somewhere else, 2 there, 3 a combination. Is that right or wrong?
That you're requesting that?
Well, we have 5 units there now, and if they determine it's 4, we only need 2 units, so we lose 3 housing units.
I would defer to the applicant to determine whether that would be even possible.
So we don't have any say.
Well, you can require, yes, you can require the number you want.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Chilton.
Okay, well, we're on this issue, but you're saying we can require whatever we want to, but based on the housing element programs, if I read through this, housing element 21, part 1, which is affordable units by definition, by that it says they need to provide 0. If I go to 21, part 2, it says we have to calculate whether we're comfortable with that concept or not. The general plan or this housing element says half a housing unit per employee. And housing element 28, which is back to affordable housing, is back to 0. So if I see what the requirements of the law are, that says that what we're left with is a half the expected full-time employees. Now, we can rely on what the applicant says, but we can also use judgment saying, come on, you're not going to have 2 employees there, right? But to go beyond that and say, well, we've got 5 units on there, and yes, they may be quote-unquote affordable compared to other places in town, that is going beyond what the housing element says.
That's the guidance for the number, but let me back up and say that this is a discretionary permit, and you're open to make reasonable conditions or impose reasonable conditions, and the number of housing units you choose to require be replaced is an open question, but what you just cited would be the guidance of what is in the ordinance and the housing element for replacement.
So I think the difference is it's a guide, it's not the legal requirement that we use that calculation.
Well, it goes back to the fact that it's quote-unquote, it's discretionary, so theoretically we can almost do whatever we want to as long as it's whatever reasonable means.
Because it doesn't define that we have to abide by the strict definition either. So that's where a lot of discussion will have to come up.
So I'm going to, again, direct this back to a more fundamental question, because the housing units may not be an issue if we don't get past the zoning issue. So I'd like to, are there any questions of staff specific to a general plan amendment to change the zoning of this parcel? Councilmember Mollett.
Okay, I've got a couple. We don't have any kind of historic preservation policy or anything that we can look at that I can find to say how it would guide us. It's an old house there. I don't know anything about it. It's been a long time when the whole thing came up about the Gibbs house. It took me days to do that. It was incredibly fascinating. I learned a lot. I haven't even gone up there and taken a look at it. So do we know anything about the history of that house at all? And I know you're also saying, well, if we do this, we probably should, do the Gates property next door. But I have had some discussions about that, and I do know that's pretty historic. That's our original post office. It's been built a long time. I won't even get into all that. So I don't, maybe you can tell me why you think, well, if we do this, we might as well do that too, because that seems very historic. And I do have questions about that little house being historic. The reason I did find a little bit out that the reason it was probably called historical residence was because nobody knew about the little house at the time, and the time when they were putting that zoning in place, the vice mayor lived there, so he declared it to be so. So that's what I found out so far, but tell me what you know.
Let me first address your question of the historic nature of the house on the subject property. And we do have a historic resource inventory that was conducted in the 70s, and it references between 30 and 50 houses in town that are notable for a certain reason or another. This house is not included on that. But as you know, the Gibbs house wasn't included either.
And also, just so I also understand the ones that were noted on there were all confined within a certain area because they just didn't go outside that area, not because they decided they weren't. They just chose, for whatever reason, not to go outside the area. So it's possible.
Well, no, I understand it was a comprehensive review of the town. There were just some structures that may or may not have been reviewed and identified at that time.
Okay.
And we're at a concept level here. We'll get more into detail, that type of detail, should this go on.
Okay.
And also to clarify, the rezoning does not necessarily have anything to do or alter any historic preservation or condition of the adjacent property. It's just conforming that site would continue to be commercially operated, commercial. And again, as was noted, that particular site, the Gates Realty site, is a retained commercial use.
Right.
So that would not, in fact, it may actually help the preservation of that particular site, because if you were noting that its post office is actually much more of a commercial use than it would be a residential use. So the zone change in that area is probably actually much more appropriate. But like I say, that doesn't really have any bearing, because if we were to choose some historic approach, we can still do that with those property in question.
So again, limiting to zoning-related questions of staff so that we can then get to the applicant's concept review. Are there any others, Councilmember Mullet?
Related to zoning, no.
Councilmember Chilton?
Bob, do you know when the last time a parcel in town was rezoned? I mean, was it the French Laundry Inn property or the Bartisono? Yountville Inn, do you know when that was?
Well, there was that rash of rezonings. That may have been not the last time, because the Bartisono and the Yountville Inn both rezoned to planned developments from mixed residential. So probably one of those projects was the last one.
10 years ago, or is it that long? About
8, yeah, 7, 8.
Okay, that's my only question.
Councilmember Dutton?
Yeah, I'm still on page 4 here. Going down, further down, it mentions that you must reconcile the meaning of the housing element policies and application of property. Then you go on to say, if it makes this exception to these policies, she could consider the impact on other requests from property owners to be relieved of these requirements. Anticipate that other applications with similar requests such relief. Can you give me an example of what you would be one of those properties, Bob, that you're dealing with it all the time?
Which paragraph are you in here?
Next to the last.
Next to the last? Okay. Well, right now, I don't think the discussion has indicated you'd be on track for exceptions necessarily, unless you were to allow a lesser number of replacement housing units than would be required by 1/2 the full-time equivalent employees. And that number, again, is a little open at this point.
Any other questions on that?
No. No, I don't.
So
Okay.
I want to ask council, would you like to ask questions as they relate to the second major theme of the application, or would you like to hear from the applicant and potential feedback from the public before we analyze that second section? To hear it from the applicant and the public? Councilmember Dutton, you okay with that?
That's fine.
So if we may hear from The applicant or representatives thereof, please state your name for the record.
My name is Bruce Peters, 6484 Washington Street, Yountville, California. Good evening, Vice Mayor and fellow council. I am representing the applicants, Mark and Candace Jessup, for the property so identified tonight. I'm glad we took the deli out because we were losing council members up here like anybody giving up. So we have three areas in which this application is going to be addressing. What you have, you've indicated two, but I consider three: rezoning, redevelopment, and use. I don't know if anybody has ever walked Washington Street from Yountville Inn up to Madison, but it's almost a 1 mile, just a hair short of a mile. And I'm going to call it the Yountville Mile, because that mile basically is our only representation of commercial properties and commercial use. Even though that we have pockets in there, of which we are one of those pockets, but I think that the long-term envision of this community is to have a central core area for commercial development, retail development. I can't envision Yount Street becoming the next commercial area, etc. So the housing element that we are in, and that's the request that we are taking here, or position, that we want to be conforming with the harmony of our adjoining parcel, which is a commercially zoned piece. The way that we can get that, obviously, is to go through scaled, residential scaled commercial. That approval for a rezoning is two prongs on it. One, it allows us to go forward with our development plan, and two, it keeps us in harmony with what we feel is the scope of Washington Street, or the Yountville Mile. This town is definitely a walking town. We have seen it, but unfortunately our trail ends. We can walk on one side, on the west side, but on the east side we have to meander around residential, meander around other developments. There is a blockage there. Unlike other communities that don't have this advantage, town is noted for that, and rightfully so, because that's what attracts people here. They can have a leisurely walk, take a look at the different operations, different hotels, different restaurants, and hopefully our unit, if it's approved. So rezoning is something that I feel that is in compliance with where this town wants to go, and it would definitely bring our ability to develop this property into a higher and better use. With regards to redevelopment, as we know that we have one residential unit there, and we have 3 apartments in the back, of which sometime in the past history someone decided to divide one of the 3 apartments, and now we have 4. All of this being non-conforming use. I do not think that the owner of the property would ever think about rebuilding those, even though if he possibly had the right to any of those types of standards. So where our intention is to replace the residential unit with one residential unit on the upper floor of this retail development. This use that we're requesting is for a relatively small parcel, 7,000, a little over 7,200 square feet. And there are very few parcels left in Yountville. The biggest one, of course, is Thomas Keller's. Most of the rest of us are falling into a relatively small individual units, potentially about the size of a residential lot. Putting the amount of development needs or requirements on small lots are sometimes like shoving a square block in a round hole. You just can't get everything in there, and you can't comply to everybody's request. We feel that the basis of making Washington Street the epicenter or the Yountville Mile to attract the consumers that come here. As noted previous, our TOT tax, if I'm not mistaken, is the highest per capita in all of California, which puts us in a very thin atmosphere for TOT and visitors. It is our intent to put a livable two-bedroom, one-bath unit as indicated in our plans, and that, you know, if it is required to do something, when I get on to the use, as you'll see the amount of employees we're going to have, we've had discussion with the planning that the possibility of expanding the town's existing in lieu of programs. That funds could either be put into the basis of utilizing possibly infill lots to offset additional housing, or in the future, if there's some annexation that takes place, this in lieu of funds could be allocated for that. With regards to use, that was a hard one. We have a family winery, the Jessups. Many people know them. Their families have been involved in the Napa County area for a long time. It is our intent to bring this family winery, which is probably going to produce somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 cases annually. So in the picture of wine production and wine use, relatively small. With our original application, we had thought about having a deli, because the town right now is in, I think, fluid motion in regards to whether or not we and where we're going to be. 25% floor area used for retail, 50% floor area retail. We decided to leapfrog above that and realize that another deli, by the time we went to Michael Chiarello's and we went to the new beautifully built neighbor of ours over there, Sumiston, and then eventually got to the deli, people I think have bought out enough salamis, cheese, and olives by the time they would get to our place. So we said, what can we bring to this community that would tie in a lot of use? We have 1,500 square feet. That's the floor area. So with a long-time friend of the Jessups, we had this discussion, and on Friday, just prior to us having to get every document in here, we've come to an agreement that we would like to bring in, as you may have seen in the flyers, Infinity Connections furniture. Rustic furniture, they've been extremely successful. They have locations in Southern California as well as Northern California. They used to be up at Rutherford. They would love to come here. They have a distribution in southern Napa, where the primary feedback for all of the orders that come in through other areas. They are delighted, even the concept of being here in the core area of Yountville. Our floor area predominantly would be a sales area. Whether or not the desk in which councilmen are sitting at or any of the things, these would be for sale, very similar to Michael Chiarello's operation. The patio furniture out in the front would be for sale. In the small area for our wine tasting, the wine tasting facility would be literally furniture that could potentially be for sale, as well as the wine tasting table. The aspect of there would be that we would have people come in at their leisure, look at the different furnitures, catalog would be there, order them, possibly have several annual sales of selling merchandise that's on hand for a new product to come in. But mostly it would be serving both locals, both visitors, and anybody else that would like to be on some type of a mailing list regarding this furniture. The owner of Infinity Connections is here. I don't have an expertise in their furniture, but I think you've seen the photos that we've taken as well as their brochures. Mr. Rodriguez could be brought up here if you'd like to ask him more intense questions as to how, where. They have a long family history. It's a facility that has been in business for some time, and we feel very proud that if we could have that incorporated into our tasting room. You may note that we did change the name, J. Gregory Connections. That will be the official name of the facility. You will not see winery or tasting or anything else there. It will be, what we want to bring forward is a concept of being able to shop, for us to give a good wine education, to have two primary artists for wall covering, both in classic painting as well as photography art. And I think that gives sort of a general overview of what we want. What I would like to tell the council tonight is that I was in Napa a few days ago at a dedication to a brand new facility that came in. And the speaker got up and introduced himself and was introducing the venue. And he said these very words: Calistoga had their day, St. Helena had their day, Yountville had their day. Now it's time for Napa. So I want to leave the council with, we have a very special pearl here. Everybody wants to take it away from us. There's not one, and we won't call them sister communities, there's not one community around here would not like to take what we have away from us. And I'm asking that we bring something forth that continues to have our good prosperity, that continues to keep us TOT the top in California. And I would like for your consideration for approval for what we would like to do with this project. I'm here to answer any questions, or Mr. Rodriguez could give you a little bit more information on the actual furniture product.
So if I can ask, let's divide this up into two pieces again. If there are any general plan amendment zoning changes that you have questions, Mr. Peters? Do you have any, Councilmember Dutton?
You're going to stay with the one
We're going to have
apartment.
We're going to have two employees. Staff had asked us how many we envision. At the time, we were still on the deli concept. But when we hensed that away, we realized we'll probably just have one person covering the wine and the other person covering the sales floor. You're not going to have abundant amount of people, picking up furniture and buying it and leaving with it. It's primarily more going to be a show and go, take orders, and shipment. And then, like I said, when you can tie it in with maybe some annual sales, that might be a little bit different. And those occasions, you might have to have more employees. But I think on a regular basis, now that we're pretty established as to what we want to do there, we can envision probably around 2 employees full-time.
Okay. So any other questions specific to the retail concept being proposed?
From your map, are you talking roughly a 50-50 split?
No. Well, it's hard to say 100%, but basically the furniture would occupy 100% of the floor. In essence, they would be literally the sales area. Obviously, we're going to have a designated area for our wine for tasting. We have a room, as you see there, it says private. That would be the area. But that table in there and those chairs in there and any component of that would be sellable merchandise. That's exactly what we intend to do. So to answer that, literally the retail product would be almost 100%. We would be utilizing a component of that in order to taste our wine and to give education on wine.
I've got some questions related to the renderings, the elevations.
Yes.
And if in fact, are you still in fact proposing the 2 options? You want feedback on both options or just one?
Well, we would like to have feedback on both options. Obviously, the one option would entail a cooperation with the adjoining property owner, of which we have really no control over that. We were just trying to utilize, because we got feedback from staff that it would be nice to maybe have a fuller front there, so that as people walk by, they could get a more visual aspect of what is in the area, instead of something that would be much more narrower. All retail likes to go wider, just from a component of marketing. But we have no force on that property next door. They could very well say, sorry, not interested. So I wanted to at least throw that concept out there, that if there was some cooperation, would the council consider that? We know that one thing we have our property, and we know that we can put in an ingress and egress lane there, and it would be more of that option that you saw where the more narrow frontage is. That's most likely what we have to go with you at least considering or looking at the potential that the other one could be brought forward to you, and then we could address that if that would become a reality.
Okay, and there are some kind of, I think, inconsistencies with the renderings here. Looking at the top sheet that shows the frontage from west elevation from Washington Street shows no presence of fire pit or seats or umbrella, which I see on your second page site plan, where you have colored concrete, then pavers for the drive aisle, and you have a seating area that appears to be gated and closed off to be used only by the retail businesses. So could you clarify that discrepancy?
You mean regarding the fire pit area?
Yeah, basically what the frontage is really being proposed. In both options 1 and 2, you have a front fire pit seating area that appears to be walled or gated.
That may have been the architect's overlooking. Originally, as you can see, the wine tasting was predominantly going to be up front, and we were considering keeping that within the parameters of the ABC requirements. In this case, now that we're going with furniture, that will be primarily just for an open patio area for people to sit, enjoy the fire pit, and the ambiance, and be looking at the furniture that's there for sale.
Is your proposal that space is only available to the patrons of the business?
No, we can keep that. We can have that as an option open to the public, which we hope it is, because that's what they're in there for. The wall itself was predominantly based for ABC requirements, and I think the architect, when we asked him to shuffle this around, probably just overlooked that.
Okay. It is just a concept, I understand that. But just to make a comment about that element in particular, we have held other businesses accountable to provide actual public open space, and has been identified in the staff report that much of your public open space requirement is proposed to be visual. And this would be an element where you have space that's being proposed to be dedicated. Really, this is really dedicated to your retail patrons.
Right, but this definitely could be opened up. This could definitely qualify into that open space that's open to the public for walking and enjoying.
Okay, so that would be one element of that might need attention.
Right. You can disregard the enclosed fencing, because that was based upon original drawings for when we had most of that up in the frontal area.
Okay, and then again on the second page here, the aerial view, I'll call it, it still shows office space in the upper level.
Yes.
Are you still proposing that that be office space?
Well, we've eliminated it. As you can see here, it is pretty much gone out of there. So we moved that up.
Well, I still show it.
This is the first drawing. It would be on the second one that has the void.
Right there.
This one right here.
The top diagram.
Yes, that's
to the right of the roof still says office.
You're right. Prior to that, we had office dedicated down below.
But that's the second floor.
Right, but this is the second floor. So the office is on the second floor.
So you're still proposing there be an office up there.
Right.
And then to the rear of that upper level is the single unit that's a two-bedroom.
Right. 2-bedroom, 1 bath, living room, kitchen, and a small dining area.
And if I understood staff correctly, that the open space requirement for the residential unit is proposed to be balconies? Is that what you said?
They had brought that to our attention. That's something else the architect hadn't addressed. But yes, we need to have a balcony.
A balcony is shown on option 2, and we just noted that if they were to go with option 1, that they would need to find a place to put the balconies.
And this building is proposed to be on the lot line, on the north lot line. So nothing could be extended over to the north. So any balconies or anything would have to go to either to the east or the south.
Yes.
Okay. And speaking to option 2, so the two main concerns I have to address with option 2 is there's no, and it's actually true in option 1, there's no pedestrian access from the parking lot to the street.
Right, we have to address that, particularly on option 1, where we have that ingress and egress on the property. And I know in our discussions, that was noted too, and that's one we have to bring it up with the architect to see if he can configure one on the possibility of the option 2 taking place, that we definitely have a pedestrian access to the back and the front.
Right, and it's true in both cases, even with the total Washington Street frontage, an element of pedestrian access, I think, is going to be necessary.
Right.
So, again, one of the questions I guess I have also as it relates to this furniture use, especially with option 2, is deliveries and accessibility to what have to, I believe, would be fairly good-sized vehicles. You're not talking about just a few cases of wine, you're talking about potentially...
Right. I would have Mr. Rodriguez address that, because I am not total as to the vehicle capacity or the types. I suspect that it's probably a bobtail, but I don't want to go on record. He could definitely clarify that.
Okay. And since he's bothered to come here tonight, I would ask if he could come and maybe address that issue.
Sure.
And how he proposes that it work in these two options.
Good evening, Carlos Rodriguez. Pretty much all our deliveries would be sent from our distribution center, which is, like I said, located outside of Napa. Any large pieces of furniture or anything like that could easily be handled by the shipping company that we use already, that is already existent in our current store right now. So, as far as big furniture going in and out of the location there really wouldn't be anything large going in and out.
What type of vehicles are you proposing would be able to deliver? I mean, if you're talking about cabinets, sofas, you're talking about the tasting table, looks like it's a 10-person table. I mean, you're going to need some level of truck access.
Yeah, our yard is very open in Napa, so like I said, any large pieces of furniture would all come from our main yard, not from this location.
So they wouldn't actually be picking the furniture up here, they'd be getting it off-site?
They'd be getting it off-site, correct.
Okay. I think that was the only question I had as it related to the furniture aspect. So thank you for that. Are there other questions of the applicant from council? Are there any other members of the applicant's group that wish to address this, or should we ask for comments from the general public?
I think probably comments from the general public would probably be appropriate at this time, then we can readdress.
Okay, very good. So,
Thank you.
Does anyone here, would anyone here like to comment on this concept? It is, again, just a concept. We're not voting up or down on anything. Yes, sir, please come forward and state your name for the record and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, my name's Michael Scher. My wife owns Raz Galleries at 6540 Washington Street. This property has always been interesting to me. To give a little history that people are wanting to know about this building and so forth, in 1992, with the Beard family, I remodeled the old post office building into the building that it is today. I designed it, went through all of the hoops and loops that under the old general plan, not the new general plan. And so anyways, you have the wonderful building that building next door, a little bit of the history of it that I learned from John, who was Gladys Beard's husband for years, did the little history book. The original house in front was owned by a gentleman that worked at the Veterans Home many years ago. The building in the back was built from absconded materials from the Veterans Home over the years. So it is really, it's an asbestos toxic nightmare. I mean, it's going to have to be really done away. I look around, I don't see anybody here, but I was one of the 20 that was on the group that put together the present general plan. And during that period of time, one of my requests to get get done with all the rezoning because we changed all the different areas and what it went through with all the preparation for the general plan, was to have that piece of property taken from the old H into the commercial because it was a pocket there. And I also wanted at the time to have the post office, the old post office building, also moved into the regular RSC zoning, just like this piece. But at the time, Larry Hooton, who was on council and the vice mayor at the time, he lived in the building in the back, and he was afraid that if it went commercial, that he would lose a place to live. Okay, so it didn't get done at that time. And the reason that the post office didn't get that done at that time when we made the general plan was that originally with Gladys, the house that's behind there, the post office was originally in her front room. So that building that Cindy is in now, the old post office building, was built in 1952. And then that was moved forward and moved the post office out of her front room into that building. And so at that time, the properties were one piece of property. And so with that general plan, they split it but left it as the non-conforming use. And so I'm all for both of these properties to being changed. As to the concept for this, I have mixed feelings. I know if my wife was here, she would say this concept of being able to cut through the parking lot in Beard Plaza to come behind, I don't think Thomas would go for it. I know not any of the businesses in the courtyard would want to, because we have a problem with enough parking without having enough adequate parking now. When Thomas created Bouchon, David Cunningham, who was the general manager of Beard Plaza at the time, it was always this smoke and mirrors of how many parking spaces you got for this, you got to have here. And so they gave parking in Beard Plaza to Bouchon so that they could bring it up. So for us to lose even 2 parking spaces for this kind of a concept cut through, it kills us, because Thomas would have to give up seats in Bouchon, basically, if he lost parking space there, no matter how it's out there. And we have enough problem with employees parking in the parking lot. And all of this saying, well, the parking after 6 o'clock and whatever. That concept of cutting through, you'd have that whole complex up in arms, and probably Thomas as well. But as for changing the zoning, I can't think of anybody that wouldn't be for it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your comments and your history. Any other members of, please?
Hi, Cindy Gates from Gates Estates. I think it sounds like a beautiful project. The only thing I'm instantly concerned with is my parking. I have my 2 little spaces I keep trying to protect right in front of my building, and my immediate concern is, even though they have integrated some parking in the back, obviously that's going to quickly fill up with what they've got. Well, and if you put the driveway down, the sign on the side on the other plan, if I could go back to that. There, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places is what you end up with. 7, okay. Hopefully, so if you've got some permanent parking from the employees that are going to ultimately live upstairs, you know that that's at least 2 cars, so that'll take those 2 parking places. So if you have someone else working there eventually, if they have the sales or whatever, I just see that back parking filling up quickly, so that's my immediate concern. Does somebody want to drive back there and have to maneuver in that little tight place, or are they just going to park in front of Cindy's place, which is tough for me as it is. Already the tenants park there all day long, and that's been a real problem. But that being said, the zoning doesn't seem to be a negative impact on me at all. I don't think so far. We'll see. But I think it's a much prettier solution than what's there. And nicer solution, and we won't have the problems we have with the destruction and stuff done to our property from the tenants in the back. So I'll be glad to get rid of that if this indeed gets passed. So that being said, parking is just my basic concern. Thank you.
If I may ask a question of you, could you comment on your thoughts about the fact that there would be basically no lot setback adjacent to your property? It's basically right up against the north property line. Do you have any comments about that proposal?
That is a concern. That'll make that whole side of my building dark. Right where I sit in my office, I've got that light coming in from that side. So if a huge two-story building goes right up next to me, I'd have to take another look at that when I see the plans that they're definitely going to use. It sounds like they haven't solidified what they're actually going to do, and it sounds like their architect hasn't firmed up some of the things. I think the overall look and concept's gorgeous. If they could, wouldn't they have to abide by some type of setback rather than snug right up to the property line? I mean, that's what usually has to happen.
That's in question.
Right. I'd like to see that. A little breathing room on that side would be great.
Okay.
But I don't know if they'll still have enough room for their access there. And then more of a walking space in front, where I see they have a little bit there, but it doesn't look very defined. Because right now it's just gravel. And, this would be fun to see how that gets done.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other public comments? Yes, sir. Please state your, if you could just wait till you're there so you're on the record and state your name, please.
Roy Eisenmenger from Jessup Cellars. I wanted to comment for a moment on the used car, because there was a letter that was circulated apparently to the town clerk from, quote unquote, all unanimously from all the tasting rooms in Yountville. And it just came to our attention yesterday in terms of the ownership. And we would like to distance ourselves from that opinion. So we don't have a problem with as many tasting rooms as the council and the market allows. And so I guess that's my main comment.
Okay, thank you. And just for the record, the statement that is being referred to is presented on a completely different item, so it hasn't been presented tonight on this concept review. Does council have any other, do they have any comments you'd like to give the applicant, since we are still talking about the concept presentation? Any final thoughts? That's what I'm proposing.
About the whole thing?
Yes, we're not making any decisions.
Oh.
This isn't a public hearing, so we're giving guidance on the concepts. There are two concepts. There is the general plan amendment portion, so any feedback they can then take back and work with staff is what we're looking for. Councilmember Dutton.
Yeah. Well, I just had one, and it sort of alluded to what Ms. Gates just said there, and also Mr. Scheer. You apparently have had no discussions with the adjacent property owner about an easement for parking?
Yes, we have.
Positive, negative?
On the record, any comment? Yeah, please.
Oh.
Just so we can get everything on the record.
Ruben Perez, half property owner of the parcel, and I have talked to Thomas. He is open to anything. He wants it to get a little further. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He talked about a perpetual lease of the driveway. So there is discussion, but no commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Mueller?
Is public hearing closed?
It's not a public hearing.
Well, I mean, public comments.
Yes, public. That was a courtesy to hear feedback. We're just reviewing the concept, so if you have any additional comments about the concept, now would be a good time.
We're discussing. Okay.
We're not making any decisions. We're trying to provide feedback to the applicant.
Okay. I'll just give you my comments then. Overall, I think that residential scale commercial for this area kind of makes a lot of sense. I think that that is something that conceptually I'm certainly open to. I think it's going to take me a long time to kind of really work through all the housing. I think there's a real human component. There's 5 different groups of people renting those housing, and just having one here, I did hear that there might be some financial mitigation, but I would still have to work through, we can, I don't think that I would necessarily only be committed to abiding by the law of, maybe just one a unit, because I do think that there's 5 here. We put a lot of time and care into affordable, whether they fit that definition or not, and losing housing stock would be a big concern to me. So I'd really need a lot more thought about that. One apartment on top certainly would right now certainly not be acceptable to me. I like the concept of the furniture kind of going in there, and just for the record, I've never approved a wine tasting room in residential scale commercial to date. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Chilton, any guidance?
Sure. I'm going to take this in reverse. And to me, there are 2 almost completely independent issues being discussed. I'm going to take it in reverse. One is the proposed use in the assumption that this is a residential scale commercial development. I think that the project looks very nice. It's obviously very conceptual, and we've always encouraged applicants not to spend tens of thousands of dollars designing things before they understand what is going to happen, and I think that's very wise. Wine tasting room, I don't have an issue with that. I think all of it looks appropriate. There are details to be figured out. Open space requirements are difficult. I think they're onerous and probably unreasonable in many cases, but they are what they are. To back up, the assumption I made is residential scale commercial. And when this property was for sale, at what was, considering where it was, a very low price, there was a reason for that, and it's because it's not zoned commercially. And a lot of people, I know, had some look at that. I have people talk to me going, wow, look at that property on Washington Street. I said, you better go and read what the zoning requirements are of that. I consider it, this is the 4th year I've been on the council, we've never rezoned any parcel since I've been on the council. And I think it's a very significant deal on its own to rezone a parcel. Zoning exists to give residents, businesses, everybody a clear roadmap of what is going to happen in the future. And this is a very different change. So I'm skeptical of the rezoning, and I would encourage, if the applicant wants to go forward with that request, I really encourage the public to give us their opinion on that, because it does set a precedent, in my opinion, of going along Washington Street. We look at Washington Street and say it's the main corridor of town, but as well, this was zoned residential when you went through an extraordinarily detailed process of a general plan. I always kind of looked at it and go, wow, that's an interesting little postage stamp on the top of the commercial section, but it's residential right now, and I'm sure that's why it was done. So to go back and change that, say, because I like the use, I think that's a very significant deal. So I would really encourage the public to take a look at this. I'm sure they'll read in the paper, and most people will find out about it for the first time. And I don't know. I just want to be sure that we don't say, okay, well, you go to North Washington Street and there's some nice parcels that are adjacent to commercially zoned properties right now, and there's nothing else in town, and wouldn't it be great for that to be a wine tasting room or some other retail component? And I look at each situation differently, but at the same time, how do you say yes to one person, no to the next one, when the facts on the ground are virtually the same? So that's my comments, and I don't know if that helps very much, but I would put myself on the concept. That's fine. The question is, should this concept be where it is? And that part I'm skeptical.
Thank you for your feedback, Councilmember Dutton.
Yes, well, I certainly understand where Councilman Chilton's coming from, but and I think the gentleman that mentioned about being on the 1992 plan where the general amendment was taken care of, and the reason that this didn't get changed. And those things happened, I'm sure, many years ago, and for the right or wrong reasons. I think if you really look at it, yes, it'd probably say, hey, it probably should be commercial all along. I certainly see what you're saying, Councilman. You know, all of a sudden you're going to make a change. The big thing, we're going to lose some housing in it regardless, one way or another. How much we could salvage, I don't know. One scares me a little bit. 1 for 5 doesn't really seem like a good ratio. And also, if we're going to change it to commercial, that's fine. I mean, I could understand that. But I think along with it, again, like we just got through talking about dog park, 7,000 square feet is not very big to try to stuff everything in here that you're talking about. We talked about setbacks. So all of a sudden, I think you said you have a 55-foot lot. Now you're down to maybe 5 less feet on one side. I think, to try to get what you're talking about in that small piece of property, I just don't know if it can happen. I mean, I like the concept. I like the furniture aspect of it. I'm not enamored, quite honestly, with more wine tasting rooms. I think this particular concept with the furniture and the diminishing of the emphasis on the wine certainly plays a part in maybe making the decision I would. But at this point, I can see an awful lot of problems, and I'd certainly like to see something that could be scaled back, but to make the property a little more open, I know it's probably not going to be feasible from a cost standpoint. And as far as the loss of 4 units, that with only 1 replacement, I would be a little skeptical that I would approve that.
Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Can I make one follow-up comment?
Yes.
I would also, aside from the zoning issue, the issue that comes to housing, and I understand the desire to make the number of employees as low as possible for what the rules say. I think over even the long term of this process, which would be probably fairly lengthy, if you go back to the Bouchon Bakery example of them saying, well, we're going to have 3 employees in there, and you look inside and everybody looks back and says that was a complete joke. I just caution you to be very careful, because I think it could be a lightning rod for controversy about the fact that there is an office on site, there's dual-use retail, you've got a private tasting room. I can barely think of a tasting room in town that's a tasting room only, that only has that one room, that only has 1 employee servicing their customers. And the fact that you would have that much space, I think people are going to, I'm a little bit skeptical of it, but I think that's going to become a little bit of a lightning rod of, you're really only going to have 2 employees. You've got to give them a 30-minute lunch under the state of California laws. You've got to give them 10-minute breaks. You've got an office upstairs. I just think that went through carefully.
Thank you. And my comments, I've made most of my points of concern as they relate to the concept, the design. I have very skeptical, concerned about option 2 with total reliance, access to the site through the other parking lot, whether it be for deliveries or general business. And to the point that was made about the loss of 2 other parking spaces, I'd be very hesitant to find that acceptable. I'm concerned, I'd certainly want a more clearly defined presentation of the entire landscape area, floor plan, interior and exterior. As I stated, I look at one concept, it has a store frontage, and the other concept has a fire pit and chairs. So I'd like to see some consistency about what it is you're actually proposing. And then my other comment relates a bit to what Councilmember Chilton was referring to, and it's the general plan amendment. And that's a big deal. and we have always treated it as a big deal. The last times it has happened has been at great expense to the applicant, frankly. We have held them accountable for housing units certainly better than a 5-to-1 ratio. We've held that request and granting of a general plan amendment, regardless of how that general plan amendment or a general plan zoning was allowed to continue in its existence. We take it very seriously when we're asked to change this. It may make sense in this case. It's certainly, I'm open to the idea, but with that concession by the town, I think it's going to come at some concession to the application. And looking at some of the other applications that we have dealt with, we have actually then increased the requirement on housing, increased the requirement on public access or open space. So I would just be thoughtful about those elements when you're putting together a final concept. So it's a bigger deal than just a change of use on site for a already residential scaled commercial or commercial zone. So I would just urge you to take that into consideration. Any other comments before we close this item? Hopefully that's sufficient feedback for you to move forward and work with staff. One other point I would just like to make with staff is if they propose affordably priced units, one or more, would that not give them some exceptions in terms of floor area ratio or their open space requirements if they price those units as legally affordable spaces as opposed to market rate units? Aren't they giving credit for floor area?
Well, they would get provision of affordable units would waive the in lieu impact fee for housing, for affordable housing. But, and there would be required under the 1/2 equivalent, whatever that number is, for those would be affordable.
Right, but that might be an option if it's determined that with 5 existing units, we're going to require 3 or 4, and they aren't in a position to actually put those on site. If they make those, say, 2 units affordable units by definition, then there is some value that they would get from that.
Well, they would be meeting, apparently, if I understand correctly your question, they would be meeting their obligation under that Program 21 that applies, the portion of it that applies to them for affordable, provision of affordable units and the changing of the zone residential or commercial.
I just bring it up as something that staff might want to talk to the applicant about, that's another option in terms of the market rate required units or trading affordable units for market rate units.
I think the message that we're hearing is that housing's a concern. And I think we can be somewhat creative, or it may take a creative solution, and it may take something different. One thing I do want us to keep in mind for the council as we come into some of these things, at some point in time, as you know, we've always had our conversation about our rules and how to apply the rules. At some point, we're also going to suggest that we have a little workshop and we start thinking about what is it we want, and are our rules helping us to get what we want. And I'm just offering that. And then it also, you know, this is a very challenging situation here on this particular site because you have a very non-conforming use, historic non-conforming use, something that I'm hearing generally most of you would say probably doesn't really belong in that use category, but it's there, been there. And I think there's some recognition that all those things you want don't fit on a 7,200 square foot lot. So at some point we are going to have a more detailed conversation about how do we proceed with maximizing what's the important elements to develop the economic foundation while maintaining that balance with the residential community. So just something to put in our thinking cap, and staff is looking at the idea of having a planning workshop in July so that we can address some things on not when you always have a concept, even though this is a concept, but to take a a little different look at what we have remaining, because as we approach build-out, you aren't going to get everything you want left in the community on the last parcel that we're going to get built. So I do think that will, we hear, I think you provided a lot of good guidance to both staff and to the applicant, and I think I hear that there's concern, but an openness to consider the application as it comes forward on both fronts.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will close the concept review on item 10 and welcome Mayor Sossman back to the dais.
Anybody need 2 minutes to freshen up?
Yeah, I would.
I think there was wasn't in front of Young Villain Mobile Home Park.
Yeah, we've done some.
Was that? That's what I was thinking when I said that.
I'm leaving. I moved to adjourn. Bob.
Part of the deal was,
it's quite sensitive state. Are we still going to talk about shrubbery?
I don't remember how much.
Nobody here.
How much of it did?
Forestation thing.
Somebody can make a motion to continue it.
Yes, we do. We're going to have to continue this meeting. We killed it. We killed the dog. Oh, gosh. That's too bad. I mean, there was so much work put into that. It was a process. We had to put. Okay. Is my hair messed up? I fell asleep. Do I have handprint on my face? I know. Let's just say if they are watching. Okay, come on. Well, you had your chance. I know. I didn't even hear it.
My understanding is in order to give it its proper time and discussion.
Absolutely. We have no issues with that.
That's
No
fine,
issues
yeah,
with
I
that.
totally agree. That's the only issue.
No, it's, yeah. It's not that we
Because
don't.
this is also one we're trying to get a better understanding from the council as to the totality of what you want to go, because what staff's briefly identified is simply that there's a number of issues, consolidation, and then there's also developing, as Councilmember Moeller was commenting on, what is the potential funding impact for something like this?
Right.
And it's
We have
very hard
budget
for
issues
us,
that need to
it's
address.
very hard for us to do that right now with the way this program is currently administered. So given the length of day that you've had today, staff is not at all uncomfortable with the fact that
We
you
would
don't want
like
to try to
to-
cram this in 15 minutes. We understand and respect that.
So there's a motion to continue.
Does July sound good?
Sure, certainly. There's a motion to continue this, this issue until July, perhaps.
July 6th council meeting.
And the second?
There was a second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. That. Staff informational reports?
We have one. Did you have one?
No, I was about to say we had none, but apparently we have one.
Yeah. What we were asked to bring to you was the bus stop at northbound Washington at Madison by Gordon's. We're in design right now. I'm making comments back to the consultant. What we're looking at is needing more room there at the sidewalk for the buses and the bus stop. So we want to move the curb out 3 feet, make it concrete. This is in the old part of town, so we're recommending take it to TAC, discuss it with them, and if they recommend that design, then we would move forward, unless you wanted to make any comments at this time.
Well, I think, that proposal was, they tried to reconfigure that intersection once before, and they brought back the curbs and the concretes and the striping and the signage and everything else, and we kind of put the nix on that one. So I'm not sure what it is you're looking for, asking for. Can you
Let me try to clarify
bring
a little
back a
bit.
concept? Or?
Let me just try to clarify a little bit. What we have is, you've got a curb cut there with a curb and AC. And in order to have an ADA accessible bus stop, staff is really recommending in just that little section where the current curb cut and everything is, probably needs to be concrete in order to, we're not talking miles of sidewalk, but, for the bus to come off, the person to get off, and safely enter the intersection there. And that's what, knowing your concern, we asked that, there be some feedback on, if you want to stay, right now the little curb area there is AC, with a little curb, and there was a concrete sample to try to match it to look like a railroad tie. And that's why we're checking in this, recognizing the council's sensitivity to this issue.
You're talking about, if I may, just at the corner, not in front of Gordon's or Ponch's.
That's correct.
There's the Gordon's parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And
north side of that.
So north side of there is asphalt concrete with a wooden curb there to the crosswalk. So it's about 40 feet of asphalt sidewalk and a wooden curb. What we want to do is give more room for when the bus stops and puts out the ramp for a wheelchair, then there's room for the people in the wheelchair to get onto the ramp. So it'd be, instead of 5 feet, it'd be 8 feet wide, and it'd be concrete instead of wood and asphalt.
And my understanding is, town manager said that's not wood anymore. That's a faux wood curb.
It's a combination. The curve on the area, if you go to the curve, it's that demonstration concrete with a...
There's a curb return, the curvature in the road where you turn from Madison on Washington onto Madison. That's concrete, it's brown, but south of the end of the curb return is wooden curbs with asphalt behind it and sidewalk.
Well, my question would be, I feel like every time we talk about a sidewalk, it's $50,000, so how's that going to get paid for?
No, it's part of the grant.
So you think there's money in there?
Yeah, there's enough money in there for concrete.
Okay, I want to see that in writing.
The design and reconfiguration and the new materials, yeah.
Right.
Can you bring us a little plan or something to look at?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We'll have that sent to you because that is all part of the grant program that you approved from the NCTPA for the bus stop.
Right.
Again, what we're really just checking in with you is that little area, is at and it's right at the intersection of Madison and Washington northbound. And
I'm just going back to the community center when we talked about the sidewalk in front of the post office, and it was 20 feet, and I forget how many, it was 5 figures, right? So that's what I mean, that says we had extra money left over in the grants, I
smaller,
guess?
and this is covered out of the grant. But again, the big issue here is if, the current material is AC and staff is proposing concrete because of maintenance and the need from an accessibility, asphalt has a higher, it breaks up easier, but that's why we're checking in with you. If you absolutely tell us it has to be asphalt, that's how it will be bid.
Just show us the money.
Well, and the aesthetic is a bit of a concern. This is going to be a very short stretch of lightly colored concrete.
Well, we'll put the lamp black, but it will be white concrete instead of black asphalt concrete that is right now.
Okay.
That's why we're having the conversation.
Okay. Any more staff reports?
Oh, what did I do with the agenda? Here we go. Council reports, flood control. I did not attend because I was here all afternoon. NCTPA, that's tomorrow. And Upper Valley Waste Management?
Oh, we just had a meeting, excuse me, Monday. The only thing really discussed, getting lined up for budget. Also, as Eric mentioned, we did have the food waste program, and it, I think, went very well. And we do have appointments set up to follow up with a number of restaurants next week, so hopefully we can get the food waste program going. And I'd also like to mention, as deforestation has now been 1.5 years since the most beautiful walking path in town has been closed, and we'll go from there.
Thank you for those comments. Any other reports, comments? I happened to be wandering around aimlessly in the lobby, and I ran across this Waterwise Landscaping Workshop series sponsored by the City of Napa and the town of Yountville, and I just thought I'd bring it up. Tomorrow they've got Sprinkler Smarts. Wednesday the 26th we have Deciphering Drip. And June 2nd is Soils, Mulches, and More. And on Wednesday, June 9th, it's the Perfect Plant Picks. Now, these are exciting workshops. And for more information on these workshops, we talked about water earlier. Yes, they are. They're all free. And for more information and to register for any of these workshops, call 257-9309 if you're still out there watching. And you can pick up these little brochures right here in Town Hall.
Those were also mailed out in the water bill.
If I may, Mayor, one thing I just remembered about the Green Building Showcase that's taking place this Thursday night at our community center. If folks haven't had a chance to come check it out, or they want to get a little bit more background on the green building aspects of that community center, that would be the opportunity to do it. 6 to 8, I believe.
Or something like that. 6:30?
6:30?
That's what's on my calendar.
Okay.
One other.
Any other comments?
I think also worth noting is this Friday, the 21st, is the annual Yountville Elementary School Carnival.
Wine Festival?
No, two different things.
Oh, yeah?
Which I think is 5:30 to 8:30 or so at the school, and then from 4 to 8, overlapping, is the Napa Valley Education Foundation fundraiser at the community center, which is a wine and food fest. So there you go.
And is CAL FIRE going to grill at the carnival? And
I hope so. I'm just going.
okay. Extreme Teens. All right, future agenda items, nonprofit grant request presentations for fiscal year 2010-2011, Parks and Community Services Commission interviews, one position.
Currently do not have any applicants, so if anyone's listening and would like to apply,
If
please
anybody's
apply.
still listening, there is an opening on the Parks and Community Services Commission. And is that a partial term?
Partial term, filling in an expired term, so it's through January 2011. So just
Okay, good. With that, we will adjourn to closed session. Do we have a need for closed session?
Just briefly on item B, Madam Mayor, member of the council.
Item B,
That's
okay.
the one conference with legal counsel anticipated litigation, one potential case regarding SCI.
We will adjourn to closed session. Thank you.
You're going to take a
and-
motion to extend, right, once I leave, after you pass?
Why don't we just do it now?
We may be finished
We
within
do it
5
now?
minutes.
Probably finished before.
Okay.
Can we take a prospective
think so?
motion